A very good morning to all of you. I'm General Gadyok here, the Director General, Amity Institute of Defense Strategic Studies and the Amity Center Defense Strategic Analysis. Ladies and gentlemen, we heartily extend a warm welcome for the joint global virtual seminar today to Honorable Dr. Ashok K. Chauhan, Founder President, Amity Education Group, Dr. Atul Chauhan, the Chancellor of Amity University, Uttar Pradesh, and esteemed Professor Dr. Balvinder Shukla happens to be the Vice Chancellor, and Dr. W. Selva Murthy. We extend warm welcome to Air Marshal Anil Chopra, PVSM, AVSM, Vayu Sena Medal and Visis Seva Medal, Director General, Center for Air Power Studies, which is at New Delhi. Also, Ambassador Anil Triguniat, a distinguished fellow at the Vivekananda International Foundation, Lieutenant General Dr. Subrata Saha, PVSM, UISM, YSM, VSM Bar. He is the former member of the National Security Advisory Board and Deputy Chief of Army Staff. We also have Dr. Manpreet Sethi, a distinguished fellow at the Center for Air Power Studies, General Shashi Asthana, Sena Medal, Visis Seva Medal, retired Director Courses, USI of India, and Mr. Nora Faoud, Academic Director. He is from CEDS, which happens to be a think tank of national security, defense, and international relations in France, based at Paris. And Dr. Mrs. Roshan Kanijo, we welcome you too. She is the Assistant Director of Research, USI at New Delhi. And also a warm welcome to Anubhav Goswami from CAPS, the PhD scholars, Brigadier Rohin Baba, YSM, and Brigadier K.T. Krishnan from, again, a scholar from AIDSS, Amity University. So we have two scholars, research scholars from Amity University today amongst us. We at Amity, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Honorable Founder President, are extremely grateful to all the heads of national institutions, eminent strategists, and the very fine galaxy of military experts for having given the kind consent to deliver the keynote address, the special address, and of course, the talks, which are going to be highly interesting for each one of you to listen to very intently, and also not missing our very brilliant Amity students, Spectrum and Dynamic, that is future leaders of tomorrow. A very hearty welcome to each one of the most exceptional panelists here today, which are drawn out from a very illustrious bandwidth of our country for today's online seminar. I must buttress the aspect that these seminars unequivocally are the brainchild of Dr. Ashok K. Chauhan, the Honorable Founder President, who is fully abreast and feels invigorated with subjects on strategic affairs, new alignments, security matrix, and global regional escalatory challenges, conflict dynamics, as also the present contemporary, that is Indo-Pacific Eurasian conundrums, with myriad implications on India and, of course, its neighborhood. These seminars are conducted with collaborative minds of think tanks of India, tend to motivate and provide stimulating support to the youth, infusing strategic and critical thinking, thereby creating an awareness and a very innovative thought process. This tantamounts to a revolution amongst the youth, not only as far as the amateurs are concerned, but also all those who are listening in, that is the audience for today's seminar. We would like to inform you that all this critical and strategic thinking has been initiated, basically, on not only matters of political, that is military diplomacy on defense and international and external affairs, to leverage the threshold on holistic understanding on issues of national security, but also we emphasize that it must highlight corresponding productive outcomes. At ACDSA, Amity, we are essentially scholar and student-centric. To start with today, ladies and gentlemen, I shall be briefly introducing to you Dr. Selva Murthy, who happens to be the President, Amity Science Technology Innovation Foundation, the Director General, Amity Directorate of Science Innovation, Chair, Professor, Life Sciences. He's also the Chancellor, Amity University, Chhattisgarh, who would give the welcome address. But before that, it is so important for all of us to be very briefly acquainted, that is, with his credentials. Dr. Selvamoorthy happens to be the famous, why I call him famous, because he's known to every military personnel who's got substantial service in the army, more than 20 years. Everyone knows him. Spanning 40 years in the DRDO with his innovative R&D contributions. He's well known to all of us in our fraternity of the defense, member of Scientific Advisory Committee to the Cabinet, Chairman of Program Management Board in the Society of Biomedical Technology. He is also the recipient of numerous national awards on science, innovation, and technology, and Lifetime Achievement Award from the President of India. He is also nominated by the PMO as chairman of the scientific CSR of the country, which is highly unique and a very distinguished, I should say, coveted assignment, which has been given to the very illustrious scientist. May I now request Dr. Selvamoorthy to kindly give the welcome address, please. Dr. Selvamoorthy.
Thank you, General Gadiuk. First of all, let me convey my greetings, welcome, and best wishes to each and every one of you and your families for this wonderful day today. And Dr. Ashok Chauhan, the founder president, has conveyed his greetings, and he is, due to suddenly some exigencies, he is unable to join us in this discussion. But however, he has conveyed his greetings and best wishes for a fruitful outcome for the deliberations. But he is going to have this recorded and see everything, every word spoken by you. And because he has a special regards for the armed forces and also for AIDSS, which is founded by the General Gadiuk, no other than the great leader in Amity Group as a military leader. General Gadiuk has done a wonderful job. And so I welcome each and every one of you on behalf of Founder President and Chancellor Dr. Atul Chauhan, and also all members of Amity fraternity today. Let me also pay my salutations to all the service officers and their families who are rendering and who have rendered yeoman service to the country. Because when we are celebrating this Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, it is every citizen's the duty to pay tributes as well as the salutations to all the service officers, soldiers, every soldier and their family who make so much sacrifice, not only in guarding our borders, but also in comprehensive national security. When you look at comprehensive national security, just not only external aggression, internal security, disaster management, education, development, UPSC, wherever I go, I find these officers who are still contributing. So on this occasion of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, it is duty of every citizen to pay salutations to these great, the people who are rendering human service. So I am very happy to see a very distinguished galaxy, Air Marshal Anil Chopra, DG CAPS, and our Excellency Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, Lieutenant General Subrata Saha, Dr. Manpreet Sethi, General Astana, and many, many more. I'm not naming everyone. General Gadiuk has already welcomed every one of you. But in this Amrit Kal, our duty as people who have served the government and who are serving in different capacities, either in government or in non-government organizations, like think tanks like all of you, we have a moral responsibility to see in Amrit Kal, how do we give our wisdom, knowledge, experience, expertise we have gained over a period in service or now in service, and how do we give it back and contribute to make our India a developed nation. So that is why this seminar, this webinar is very important with General Gadiuk, who is the Director General of our Amity Institute of Defense and Strategic Studies, and who is the architect of the program. So when we are celebrating this G20, there are polarization happening, alliances occurring, whether we'll become a part of extended part of the NATO. So all these discussions are happening now. So in this scenario, the theme, China's nuclear modernization and strategy, becomes important. Thanks, Gadio, that you thought of this theme and then brought such a great experts to deliberate on this. So this is very topically important since we are now holding G20. So the message has to go to G20 nations as well as G7 nations. So this particular thing is important. So when we look at the topic and look at the China's nuclear doctrine, nuclear buildup, which they are having in arsenals, 350, nuclear arsenal now with the payloads already integrated, and now it's going to be 700 in a couple of years, and which is going to be touching 1,000 by 2030. They will have 1,000 nuclear arsenal. Imagine a country having in our neighborhood 1,000 nuclear warhead and arsenal, and also with the capability of a very credible nuclear triad. So we have to see this discussion today in the light of this capability which China is building over a period of time, who is our neighbor today. And what is our India's response? That is what we'll have to deliberate. Not only look at the scenario, global scenario, geopolitical scenario, but then as all the members, very distinguished members of the think tank, how do we build? So I must also acknowledge CAPS, Center for Air Power Studies, for partnering with us, sponsoring this seminar with us. Thank you so much. And we want to do many, many more things with you. And also the Amity Center for Defense and Strategic Analysis, which again, General Gadyuk is the Director General. I must appreciate Founder President Dr. Chauhan, because he not only builds education, but he has a special soft corner for service officers. That is why you will see in our Amity group, a number of service officers, vice chancellors, and also the pro vice chancellors, deans, technical and management, governance, security, everywhere service officers are there. So what Amity is today is also because of this, because Founder President knows the value of the service officers. And he has established many things, not only Amity Institute of Defense and Strategic Studies, Amity Institute of Defense Technology, to give the technology to the country in many domains, and futuristic domains like quantum technologies, AI application, machine learning, deep learning, data analytics. Everywhere we are now launching programs for defense technology. Similarly, we have Amity Military College for men and women, and we have military camp for every student. 200,000 students have to undergo the experience of the prestige of the uniform by undergoing the military camp. So such initiatives, SSB Academy we are running, we have given 400 officers to the Army, Navy, Air Force. So this is what the soft corner and the contributions which Dr. Ashok Chauhan is making, and he wants to expand, deepen this contribution. So this workshop, this seminar will provide yet another important the outcome. Also, I must compliment AIDSS Director, Tyagi, and all the faculties, Rajan Bakshi, Ritu Grover, and all other scholars who are going to share their views today. I should say a few words about Amity Group. Today, Amity Group, as you all know, I don't have to say 200,000 students, 10,000 faculties. We have filed 2,000 patents, and we have published 45,000 research papers in journals of repute. We have transferred 30 technologies to the industry. So we want to do more for defense. That is why this particular conference is very, very important. Finally, the carry home messages, the outcome, we will be eagerly looking forward to the outcome, because it should not be yet another proceeding of a webinar or a seminar which we held, but what is going to be a revolutionary recommendation, strategies, which we can convey to the government, to the military, to the Ministry of Defense, so and PMO. So let that be the outcome, and which we should look at. How do we bring a global balance? What should be our India's response? How do we bring stability and peace at the global level? Because that is what Amity is for. We are creating those future global citizens only for creating a new world order, which will be seen by good health, happiness, peace, prosperity for everyone. So this webinar, this seminar will also add to this, the mission which Amity, all of us in Amity is carrying out. So once again, I thank each and every one of you. You are all achievers, scholars in every domain which you are in, which I know personally, many of you, almost all of you I know, because I have worked with you. I have been one of the beneficiary of our collaboration with you. So my salutations to each and every one of you. And so once again, and Jalgadio, you are doing a great job, and our deep appreciation and grateful thanks to you and to everyone. Thank you.
Most grateful to you, sir, always for enlightening the audience of not only Amity, but there are lots of veterans today who are actually in the audience. I got a personal call from them yesterday and therefore yesterday. This beautiful temple of learning and cradle of leadership, which has been established by the Honorable Founder President and which you spoke about so fondly right now. All the extraordinary discernments on the subjects, we are eternally grateful to you for your incisive abilities to benefit not only the student fraternity, but all the guests in a manifold dimension. Thank you, sir. Today, ladies and gentlemen, keynote address is going to be delivered by Air Marshal Anil Chopra. So we have today amongst us an icon of military strategy, airspace, nuclear and defense issues. Air Marshal Anil Chopra happens to be one of very few people in India who happens to be an authority and an icon on these subjects. The distinguished speaker, I must not only compliment him, but also convey my gratitude because he's consented today, despite his busy schedule, to be the keynote speaker. He is a QFI that happens to be a qualified flying and test pilot and a pioneer Mirage 2000 fleet, and has also commanded a Mirage squadron and the aircraft systems testing establishment. It happens to be AST in the Air Force. He was the team leader of the MiG-21 upgrade Bison project to Russia for 4 years, which is highly commendable, and has also commanded operational air bases in both western and eastern sectors of the country. He was Air Officer Commanding AOC, that is at J&K, Assistant Chief of Air Staff, Inspections, and retired as Air Officer in Charge Personnel, which happens to be a very responsible coveted assignment in the Indian Air Force. He was a member of the Armed Forces Tribunal and member of the Executive Council of Jawaharlal Nehru University for over 2 years. An avid writer and author, he has published over 500 articles, in fact, many more, on strategy, defense, aerospace, and authored 3 books and edited another 4 books. Air Marshal runs a website, Air Power Asia, which must be noted by all the scholars and students, primarily focusing on air power and strategic studies. He has also been the Director General of Center Air Power Studies since 12th of February 2021. And he still carries on. We wish him all the very best in his pursuits. May I now request the Air Marshal to kindly deliver the keynote address. Air Marshal, sir.
Thank you, General Gadyok. I hope I'm being heard.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Silvamurthy, eminent geostrategic and nuclear experts, CAPS and MIT faculty, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a great pleasure for me to join this joint virtual seminar of Center for Air Power Studies and MIT University, and especially the MIT Center for Defense and Strategic Analysis. And I thank Dr. Ashok Chauhan, founder, president, MIT Education Group, for blessing this event. And of course, Dr. Silvamurthy and I joined service in the same year, and we retired after 40 years together in the same year again. And I have had the occasion to meet him, when he was in the DRDO, and it's a pleasure seeing you again, Dr. Silvamurthy. We in CAPS have 4 verticals of specialization. These include air and space, neighborhood studies, the Indo-Pacific, and nuclear strategy and power. We have a strong nuclear faculty headed by Dr. Manpreet, who's one of the speakers today, and we have exposed nearly 1,700 colonel and brigadier level senior officers to nuclear issues in our biannual capsules over the last 17 years. 25 years back, in the month of May 1998, on 11th and 13th, India's Defense Research and Development Organization and Atomic Energy Commission conducted the 5 nuclear tests dubbed Pokhran-2, codenamed Shakti at the Pokhran range. There were the 5 detonations, both fusion and fission. Increasingly, Interestingly, 24 years earlier than that, also in the month of May 1974, Pokhran, one smiling Buddha peaceful nuclear explosion took place, and we conducted the first nuclear test. India has acted as a very responsible nuclear power ever since. Discussions on nuclear issues have once again become very relevant. The N word has been used repeatedly as the Ukraine conflict continues to linger on. More nations all of a sudden feel the need to have nuclear weapons, and North Korea, of course, continues to fire ballistic missiles, flying across Japan, keeping the world on tenterhooks. Meanwhile, China has chosen to modernize and expand nuclear arsenal significantly. And Pakistan is a country which has a policy of first use of nuclear weapons against India. Both the US and Russia seem to have lost interest in the intermediate range nuclear force treaty, that is the INF treaty, and even now to some extent in the New START treaty. China and Pakistan continue to retain ability to launch retaliatory strikes against India. China has violated the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty norms by conducting a low-yield nuclear test at Lucknow in 2019. In July 2021, China tested a ballistic missile that circled the globe in a low Earth orbit and then launched a hypersonic glide vehicle that hit a target on Earth. Beijing has begun deploying the DF-17 solid-fuel road mobile medium-range ballistic missiles that is mounted on the ZF hypersonic glide vehicle. Just 3 months back, China deployed the hypersonic IRBM DF-27. Last year, China built additional long-range missile silos in Gansu province in eastern Xinjiang. Some are questioning why China is developing so many fixed land-based silos instead of more mobile systems. China currently has an inventory of 50, which Dr. Silva Murthy just mentioned, is planned to go up to 700 by 2027, 1,000 by 2030, and 1,500 by 2035. And they have the money and wherewithal to do this. This vertical proliferation includes increase in stockpile, enhancing the technical sophistication of existing weapons and developing new ones. Beijing's missile capabilities are also on the rise. It intends to deploy around 200 warheads on ICBMs over the next 5 years and continue to build the stockpile of more than 200 DF-26 ground-launched IRBMs capable of carrying nuclear and conventional warheads. China's nuclear-armed submarines also being modernized and growing in numbers. The opacity of Chinese intent also adds to the confusion. Till now, their approach seemed to be to maintain adequate defenses and effective delivery systems against a preemptive strike. But with the planned expansions, are they really notching up the levels of deterrence? It's something we need to debate. China's fast-growing nuclear arsenal combined with Xi Jinping's hurried push for China to become a great power and become the number one power complicates things even more. So China too follows the NFU like India and overtly seeks to promote nuclear disarmament. Its growing arsenal and increased capabilities and preparedness does pose challenges to India's security, regional stability, and nuclear deterrence. China is not even willing to get into any bilateral discussions with us. In fact, it doesn't even seem to consider India as a serious nuclear weapons player, at least so it pretends. Yet, it must be remembered that China is clearly pushing ahead of India and its conventional forces modernization. Its nuclear forces are for deterrence against the US and not against India, and therefore the numbers. China's reluctance to join US, Russia into any nuclear arms control architecture or join trilateral arms control talks is also indicative that they want to first reduce nuclear disparity before talking about reductions and verifiable legal bindings that some of these treaties will put. The nuclear arms control has become more complex now, more so after the Ukraine conflict. Despite the nuclear overhang, India and China continue to have standoffs and skirmishes on the line of actual control, including we saw Doklam, Tepsan, and now Galwan. That indicates there is scope for conventional war between nuclear powers, and this needs to be factored, and perhaps the conventional capabilities to build accordingly. China's blind eye to North Korea's nuclear brinkmanship actually amounts to tested support and complicates global security. China has also supported Pakistan's missile program. It's time to study the impact of China's nuclear modernization on India's security. India has to ensure the survivability of its nuclear weapons in the event of a first strike by any of the two nuclear-armed neighbors. Should India do a nuclear reassessment? Also, some Indian strategists are suggesting we may have a fresh look at no first use policy, which I personally believe is time-tested and is the best option for India. So what are India's dilemmas? The adequacy of size, modernization status, state of command structure, and ability to survive the first strike, to have enough means for response, strike for it to be called a significant deterrent. Is China's nuclear modernization going to increase its coercive ability on our LAC? We need to discuss. Modernization of India's delivery systems and increasing numbers may be a security imperative. Should India get into a nuclear arms race with China? No. Can we list actions that would be adequate to maintain a minimum credible deterrence? Yes. While we concentrate mostly on China now, should the continued political turmoil in Pakistan bother India in the context of nuclear deterrence, or we think that it is in safe hands with the Pakistan army? As more and more countries begin to use long-range ballistic missiles with conventional warheads for global precision strike, there is increasing ambiguity about warning and defense. Does India need something like the PLA rocket forces, or are we happy with our current structures that separate conventional nuclear ballistic missiles under separate command entities? More and more people have started writing and talking about this subject. Is there a need for India to review our command structures? Do we need to war game the new scenarios, or are we perhaps already doing that? Is being done by the SFC and the national security establishment? Does India have sufficient counter force capabilities, or are we happy with the counter value targeting against the adversary's main population centers? Because counter force ability is always much more sophisticated and difficult to achieve. Practically every day, the world is waking up to someone writing about the risk of possible use of low-yield tactical nuclear weapon by Russia. I think and hope it won't happen. The taboo must be maintained at all costs. Also, there is a lot of discussion on efficacy of use of tactical nuclear weapons. Some countries have them. Others, like Pakistan, are developing them. Pakistan has the first use policy against India under certain scenarios. India, too, is developing cruise missiles capable of carrying either type of the warheads. India clearly feels and articulates that nuclear weapons are not for war as a war fighting instrument. Some in Pakistan establishment tend to believe that in case they use a TNW, Indian political executive may deter and have a decision paralysis and decide not to respond with a massive retaliation. India's doctrinal position is very clear, and the same needs to be reiterated without ambiguity and understood very clearly at all levels. Many hawks ask, what if China decides to occupy Arunachal by force? Will India use nuclear weapons? The question may sound hypothetical, but could actually be real. Well, every response cannot be spelled out. India's no first use policy is very responsible and mature, and it needs to be held. India must continue to pursue its missile development for both accuracy and range to ensure adequate deterrence. India must build up the nuclear powered SSNs, that is submarines, and nuclear armed submarines, SSBNs, to I personally feel that we must hit a figure of at least 4 to begin with, and must happen very quickly. This is important for India to be a significant power in the Indo-Pacific. In view of the Chinese expansion, we have to review numbers by a small figure, surely, but we do not need to get into a race. Around 250 warheads is being spoken of, may be adequate for deterrence. I hope that the nuclear deterrence never fails. With these few remarks, I can see that we have a lineup of very learned speakers who will take us through the finer points on all nuclear security issues. After our affiliation between Amity and CAPS, the two institutions, this is the first ever event. And I'm happy that we are going to launch off with a great subject, nuclear, and I wish the webinar all the very best. Thank you, and Jai Hind, all the best.
Thank you very much, Air Marshal Anil Chopra. Indeed, sir, very grateful to you for your valued perceptions on China's nuclear ambition and strategies. Most importantly, providing each one of us the exceptional inspiration to fire the imagination with de novo inputs for all our scholars, and equally stirring the brilliant minds of the youth of Amity University and fraternity. Some of the very valid, I think, points and issues which have been brought up by the Air Marshal, who's the Director General, no one better than him in the country, besides the Strategic Force Command, ladies and gentlemen. He spoke about the hypersonic missile system, nuclear missiles, force multiplication. He also did speak and highlight the global deterrence. China essentially is not really looking at India with very focused attention, but United States. And that is why it wants to enhance its threshold of nuclear capabilities. The nuclear arms that is controlled, I tend to agree with the Air Marshal. It is highly complex. Dolam, Galwan, I think will continue to happen because of the Chinese brinkmanship and showcasing its combat superiority and putting down the other nations, of course, to shame with its policy of humiliation. The triad has been established, there's no doubt about it, but will it be prudent for India to have consider joining the escalatory matrix on the nuclear threshold? Well, I think the Air Marshal has very prudently said no to that, because India really cannot get into a race with China. We certainly know, I think it has already been discussed in the House circles as part of the Strategic Force Command, and I think the Air Marshal is very much privy to it. We won't discuss matters which are highly classified here, but suffice to understand for the students and for the audience today that review of present structures, as the Air Marshal has brought out, is very much underway. The countermeasures for nuclear strike capability, second strike capability, and the desirable threshold to be achieved is very much on the cards. So with a positive note, we would like to end here and get on to the next speaker. Very comprehensive, I think, details which has been given out by the keynote speaker. We are grateful to him. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now Ambassador Anil Trigoniath, who's here with us today. We are extremely grateful to him. And like I told him just a few minutes back, that I do not find any other diplomat in the country from the Ministry of External Affairs retired who has been speaking on myriad issues. I find him every day educating the students of various universities and institutions of the country, and also he has global identity. So my compliments to you, Anilji, for that. Sure. He happens to be the distinguished fellow of the Vivekananda International Foundation. But before he delivers his special address, I would just like to highlight his credentials. He's a member of the IFS fraternity, that is Foreign Service, having served in the Indian missions in Cote d'Ivoire, Bangladesh, Mongolia, United States, Russia, Sweden, Nigeria, Libya, and the Sultanate of Jordan. In the Ministry of External Affairs, he has worked in the Economic, West Asia, North African Consular Divisions. Highly commendable job done by him, which is spoken about by other senior colleagues and friends of the diplomatic circles. He's worked as Deputy Chief of Mission at the rank Ambassador in the Embassy of India in Moscow, prior to his superannuation in May 2016. That is absolutely Ochin Kharashuo for you, sir. As a visiting fellow, he conducted research work on WTO and regional trading blocs, Oxford University, United Kingdom, member All India Management Association, Delhi Management Association, as well as that of Oxford and Cambridge Society of India and Association of Indian Diplomats, that is former ambassadors. He is also the honorary member of the International Trade Council, Brussels. May I now request Ambassador Anil Trigoniath to kindly deliver the special address. Ambassador, please.
Good morning. Thank you, General Gadeok, for that very kind introduction. But at the same time, I must compliment you for focusing on a very important topic, which I told you earlier also, because this is important to learn about what is happening in China and what is China doing. In my view, China is going to be India's challenge in every geography and in every single domain. So therefore, it is important for us to understand. They say that you must keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. So we must watch them rather closely. Let me convey my greetings to Honorable visionary founder president of the Amity Education University and the group, Dr. Ashok Chauhan, who is always very inspiring, and the illustrious Dr. W. Silva Murthy, whose words are always inspiring everybody. I know that after Air Marshal Chopra has spoken, there is nothing much I can say, and I fully agree with his viewpoints on what India should be doing and how China is proceeding with this. So I would not like to go much into the details of the defense dimension of it, for which you all are extremely competent to do so. So I would like to slightly limit my 10 minutes for the Chinese strategic tactics, concerns, and concerns for India, especially as China's no first use policy seems to have undergone significant changes over time. It is often called as the strategic proliferator. You can remember Pakistan, North Korea, and Libya also when I was there. These are all examples that we look at. Now, this morning, a friend of mine, a leading Russian thinker and strategist, Andrei Kortnov, he wrote that US is like an advanced smartphone with a weak battery, to which I would like to add the Chinese foreign and security policy is like a smartphone with an overcharged battery that could explode. And the element of uncertainty in both the superpowers is pretty evident. Now that says it all. What is happening? They're trying to find some kind of an accommodation from decoupling. They talk about de-risking, all kinds of wordings. But at the end of the day, if a real student will look at it, you need to look at the kind of challenges that are happening. Chinese mind is not easy to read, but even more difficult to guess. So let's look at what some of their leaders mentioned and how they proceeded to exert themselves, and China in turn, through quiet empowerment and under the radar, moved up to fulfill its hegemonistic ambitions, fighting the centuries-old humiliation. Often there is more guesswork and prognosis than actual estimates about their cumbersome designs. We have often seen the US, very often 99% cases, people go by the US intelligence, whatever reports the United States is producing and saying they have 410 weapon systems, they have 300 or can become 1,000 or 1,500. So these are mostly, in my view, as far as China is concerned, being that the kind of deceptive policies that they follow, it is quite important to understand that the China says something and does something else. So therefore, we cannot be sure how many weapons they have. They are, of course, developing, and has been mentioned by Air Marshal Chopra also, the various kind of delivery systems that have changed. So there is still either we underestimate it or we overestimate their capability, which is itself a dangerous signal whereby one could make strategic errors. But if we have to err, let's err on the right side rather than on being on the left finger. Today, we are living through a nuclear war syndrome. Many countries are beginning to wonder that if Ukraine had not abdicated its nuclear arsenal, would it have been bombed by Russians? So the credible deterrence theory is afoot once again. For the Saudis, in the event of Iran going nuclear, despite the current rapprochement, the nuclear option cannot be wished away. And there, Pakistan with its Islamic bomb requires its alliance once again. Attacks and failing of safety nets on civilian nuclear plants are not uncommon. Fukushima nuclear reactor accident and Germany stopping nuclear power plants completely is revising its thinking once again in the wake of the Ukraine war. In Ukraine, as Chernobyl was not enough, we are witnessing the biggest nuclear plant, Zaporizhia, under constant threats of being blown up. Russian threats of using strategic weapons or the nuclear war in the end. And Biden calling about the nuclear Armageddon, as well as revision of nuclear doctrines by almost all countries, are making it all the world rather more uncertain and more dangerous. US and Russia, the nuclear superpowers, have been jumping out of various nuclear arms control treaties as if there is no tomorrow. This morning, we heard of nuclear weapons capable ICBM by North Korea being lost and flutter in the US and North Asia. One can only imagine the consequences of this disaster waiting to happen. And then we also recently had, ironically, the G7 summit in Hiroshima, which was bombed by the Americans in 1945. But there was no talk of real denuclearization. Rather than there were more focus on continuing with the war with more weapon systems and support for Ukraine and Eurasia, bringing the danger of nuclear escalation even closer. So what I'm trying to say is that we are already in a very, very difficult scenario insofar as these weapons of mass destructions are concerned. Now, Mao Zedong, as you know, had referred to nuclear weapons as paper tigers. He said that although they would not determine the outcome of a war, they could still be used by great powers to scare and coerce. He favored China's development of nuclear weapons because he said that in today's world, if we don't want to be bullied by others, we should have atomic weapons by all means. And then he started off, as you know, after the first Taiwan Strait crisis in 54-55, and in 1964, they detonated their first nuclear bomb. And since then, it's a history that has been talked, and they have worked on guided missile technology. The silos are being created, which everybody is a little bit worried that exactly what are they for if they only have 300, 400 weapon systems. So they are working in a very comprehensive manner. But China's nuclear policy tried in the beginning for a long time. They continued no first use policy and has been of minimum deterrent. But they also continued to pledge that, okay, we are not going to have the no first use. We are not going to attack anybody in the first. But there is a gradual change which is being witnessed in their policy. So this is what will depend on exactly how the nuclear non-proliferation regimes, which are currently on the back burner, are going to be brought out on the plate. China was invited by the United States to come and discuss in the discussions about this. China refused to go there. It says that our arsenal, the parity is not there. We are nowhere near. Let the big powers decide and come down to our level. Then we are going to discuss. So that is a no-go situation. So even though it is a NPT member, that does not mean that it is fully abiding by all the regulations. Since 2017, the Chinese nuclear facilities, or IAEA, has not been reported to what is happening there. So it is once again sort of a jungle raj kind of a thing that's prevailing there. Now, they keep on publishing their white papers, and that is what gives you some idea. Now, that is their paper. You need to see, and very often the Pentagon papers come out, which gives you all kinds of states. But several Chinese and American experts have said that if necessary, China must abandon. Many of the Chinese strategists these days are calling that we must either revise or abandon the no first use policy. So far, they have not done that. So, but their force size and the structure is changing. That is, everybody knows about it. And that is, I think that this is either because of the environment, their study of the strategic environment around them, or the challenges with the United States and others, or quest for superiority. These are the two things that are essentially the key drivers for them. Now, recently, President Xi Jinping's strategic thought seems to convey that China's security environment essentially has these three trends and the three major dangers. Now, the three trends are the external environment, international situation that is constantly changing, and new opportunities and challenges that are continually emerging. And three major dangers are those of China are being invaded, toppled, and separated. Now, these are the things that are changing its preferred strategy of minimum deterrence to a limited deterrence. This is the step one that they have moved on overtly. And that is something that is causing a major problem. Now, I would not go into the details of what kind of ICBMs or what kind of silos, whether it is DF5 or whatever. This is all going on. But the recent report in Pentagon in 2020 said that China's ICBM launchers have increased from 100 in 2020 to 300 launchers in 2021, and now to more than 450 in 2022. And if you are going to see in 2023, you might have it already 700-800 at that speed. Now, these are something which are capable of carrying over more than 1,500 warheads and others. So they are, the study also says that they will exceed in terms of launchers that of the United States, which has about 3,700 warheads. So it is a situation, even though one can say, or everybody thinks, perhaps prematurely, that the China is not looking for nuclear parity with the United States. So we have to be ourselves be very careful exactly what is it going to have an impact on us. Because as I said, and I would completely endorse what Air Marshal Chopra said, that what is our doctrine? We need to revise doctrine. This does not mean that we are going to continue to engage in a nuclear arms race. That is not what India's fundamental policy is there. India's policy essentially aims at nuclear disarmament, the general disarmament of all kinds of weapons. That's what we stand for. We stand for peace, dialogue, and diplomacy. So despite the fact that the Chinese have created a mischief on our borders, we have continued to talk to them. And that is what the world needs to fully understand there. Now, these NFU commitments, you all know that basically when it's a no first use rule is there, when China, which always emphasizes it very often, it has of course not been talked about since I think in 2015 or 16 onwards. So there is a certain change. Now, what does this NFU say? It says that not to use nuclear weapons first against countries that possess nuclear weapons. Then not to threaten use of nuclear weapons first against countries that possess nuclear weapons. Not to use nuclear weapons first against countries that do not possess nuclear weapons. And not to threaten to use nuclear weapons first against countries that do not possess nuclear weapons. But some people have debated, basically, that this is not an unqualified NFU policy. Because if China, let us say it was mentioned about Arunachal Pradesh, which it presumes to be its own territory, or Taiwan for that matter, if it wishes to go in there and considers them as the renegade provinces, then they might justify this use as a strategic target for them. So we need to really be worried about those things and think about what is happening. The two things I would like to say is we should try to have our own independent estimates of China's potential and prowess in this regard. We know their objectives, we know their intent as far as India is concerned, and Pakistan is, of course, first use policy against India is there. And secondly, what are we going to do about it? And thirdly, not get carried away by the global geopolitics, which is may try to pitch one against the other. So I would stop here and thank you very much once again for inviting me to share my thoughts.
Well, thank you very much, Anilji. Thank you very much. That was an excellent expose. And as usual, I should say that your perceptions are always transcendental. Any of your addresses that we've heard at Amity, in fact, my compliments to you, absolutely remarkable about China, its nuclear proliferator status, which you said. Of course, each one of us know today who are attending this particular session that China became a nuclear power in 1964. And all the inputs given by the diplomat are indeed very, very worthy of taking cognizance. Some of the issues which I would like to just take about a minute or so, which he said was China's pursuit, ladies and gentlemen, in as far as nuclear arsenal. Well, the figures may be differing by a couple of missiles here and there, whether it's given by the Carnegie or it's given by the Pentagon or other various think tanks of the world. But Pulkit Mohan of the ORF, that is Observers Research Foundation, well, she said that I think it comes to about 350 warheads, 248 land-based missiles, 72 sea-based missiles, ballistic missiles, and 20 nuclear gravity bombs. But what does it mean? And how do we exemplify that? We shall see with the other speakers in the line and the panelists. Armageddon, apocalyptic. This concept, of course, seems to be getting revitalized because Putin has been sharing his hugs, which we have been seeing actually in the news channels with the North Korean, that is with the premier. And they both seem to be having some kind of very, I should say, covert understanding, a symbiotic connect to use nuclear proliferation, whether they can call it a bluff in the Eurasian ongoing war, has got to be seen. We have to see as to how it comes out in the next couple of weeks and months. But he is very correct by saying that the Chinese nuclear policy, the no first use, which India believes, the credible military deterrence, is the same that we too believe. But Xi Jinping certainly has made a mention about the internal threat, external manifestations of the threatened environment, and also the new opportunities which have been mentioned. But I think one thing that we all tend to be in unison, and there's a consensus that China certainly doesn't feel that it can match to the United States potential in as far as nuclear warhead capability is concerned, of 3,700 approximately warheads of the United States. But India requires to review its nuclear doctrine. We believe in disarmament, peace, stability, and policy. However, he's spoken about the NFU and about qualifying its impact. I think we require to take cognizance of that, and also threat manifestation, that is Chinese nuclear strike capabilities. So now with that, ladies and gentlemen, we come on to our next very illustrative speaker on such issues, and that happens to be none else than Lieutenant General Dr. Subrata Saha, a very good friend indeed of us and a fine colleague. We are also very proud that it's not only a military general, but he is a military intellectual giant who is amidst us here today and has consented to deliver the special address. Now, I can only say that his very successful military career and unprecedented, in fact, career highlights require to be introduced, because without that, we certainly will not allow the general to speak today. You all must get acquainted with him. He retired as the Deputy Chief of Army Staff and created the Army Design Bureau in 2016. And post-retirement, he was the founding Director General of the Society of Indian Defense Manufacturers, SIDM, which happens to be an institution which validates defense issues, very important macro level defense issues. He was GOC of the 15th Corps Kashmir, the Additional Director General Military Operations, the GOC of a strike division, the Deputy Regional Commandant of Assam Regimental Training Center. He was also the that is Deputy Regional Commander, United Nations Mission in Angola in Africa. He was the commander of the Higher Command Wing and was also posted as the instructor at the premier Indian Military Academy. He achieved the rare distinguished grading on the Junior Command course and happens to be the only Indian Army officer who is a graduate of both the Staff College at Camberley, United Kingdom, and the Army War College, United States, which both happen to be blue chip graduate points for senior officers, where he was adjudged the best overseas student and awarded the gold medal also at the High Command course. He has done his PhD on irregular warfare, his MPhil double master degrees from the Madras University and Pennsylvania, United States, and diploma in management. He is a distinguished fellow of the Center for Joint Warfare Studies. His articles, papers, and opinion pieces are widely published in India and foreign journals. I can go on about him like others, like Marshal Chopra and the former diplomat, like I said, Anil Trigunerji. But I will now request the General to kindly initiate the special address. General Saha.
Thank you, General Kadyok, for the very warm introduction. Dr. Selvamurthy, General Kadyok, all the faculty members, very distinguished speakers and participants of the seminar today. Let me begin by complimenting the founder president of the Amity Education Group, Dr. Ashok Chauhan, the Chancellor, Dr. Atul Chauhan, and Dr. Balwinder Shukla for the great initiatives that you all have taken in the field of defense and strategic studies and defense technology. My compliments to Colonel General Gediok for spearheading the defense and strategic studies, and Dr. Selvamurthy for spearheading the defense technology bit. My compliments to the DG CAPS, Air Marshal Anil Chopra, and the Institute for putting this, as all of you have said, a very topical, seminar, putting it together. So I will use these 15 minutes of mine to try and touch upon 4 points which I thought are important. First of all, why are we all perceiving this shift in China's nuclear strategy? And what is the shift all about? And the next thing, of course, is, how does it affect India? And in the process, we will also touch upon related issues from the US and other countries. So one thing is becoming quite clear, that from a concept of limited deterrence, China is shifting away to a posture that envisions becoming much more powerful and consequential in the evolving global order. Until recently, as all of you have pointed out, China pursued a strategy of assured retaliation and developed a relatively, with the United States, a small but survivable force. Nuclear weapons played a restrained role in China's overall military strategy for deterring a nuclear attack or preventing nuclear blackmail and coercion. China's no first use policy, all of you have touched upon, meant to be a retaliatory posture, but actually it rings very hollow. Because on the one hand, if you say you have a no first use policy, and on the other hand, you are supporting nations, in fact, you're running their nuclear programs of China, North Korea, and others, who are brazenly demonstrating nuclear power to achieve their political goals. So what is this no first use are we talking about? If you are supporting countries who are so, openly brandishing this whole business. Most of you have spoken about China's modernizing and expanding nuclear arsenal. I would like to add 2 more points to that. It is modernizing, expanding, and diversifying the nuclear arsenal, which is important to note. And into this, I would like to add 1 more point, is China is actually intertwining, I repeat, it is intertwining nuclear capability with conventional capability to achieve, as I said, to be seen as a consequential and more powerful sort of country in this evolving global order. So if you recall the way the US, offset strategies had evolved in the first offset, where Eisenhower wanted to, offset this, the quantitative disadvantage against the Soviet Union, the 92 Allied divisions against 175 Soviet divisions. He went on to, with this doctrine of massive retaliation, using nuclear weapons as a credible deterrent. Well, the first offset lasted for about 2 weeks, and by the time it started to, the chinks started to get visible, they initiated the second offset, which also is called the Revolution of Military Affairs, and the devastating effect of that we saw during the first Gulf War, and thereafter, whether it was the air war in Kosovo, Iraq, Afghanistan to some extent, and so on. And now we are seeing in the US the third offset technologies, which is a combination of learning machines, AI, human-machine collaboration, assisted human operations, human-machine combat teaming, network-enabled autonomous weapons, and so on. Now, while this is how the US strategies have evolved between the conventional and the nuclear, if you see the Chinese, they started with the People's War, and the outcome of that we saw in the form of the human wave attacks in 1962, in 1969 against Soviet Union, in 1979 against Vietnam. And from that, when they witnessed the second offset or the revolution in military affairs and its devastating effect in the Middle East, in the Iraq, Kuwait first, and then later in Iraq, they unleashed that famous unrestricted war. And now you can see they have used this time to build their conventional force. They are using the time now to build their nuclear capability. And that is why I highlight now what we are seeing is an intertwining of nuclear and conventional capability. Now, why is this shift happening in China's strategy? You see, as far as China is concerned, wrong, right, you can keep questioning it. It is taking actions that enhance its security vis-a-vis United States of America, because it perceives US as offensive and threatening. So therefore, it is increasing its own military capabilities. Both US and China, in their own ways, view themselves as pursuing defensive goals. But the result, as we all are seeing, is increased instability and the spiral of tensions into which all of us willy-nilly, including India and others, are getting drawn. Now, this shift in the conventional balance of forces that is happening in the region and the US development of lower yield nuclear weapons has obviously led to great fears in China of US limited nuclear use in a conflict. US will not agree with this, but this is what the Chinese writers are writing about. Chinese strategists believe that US non-nuclear or conventional strategic capabilities can threaten Chinese nuclear forces. So therefore, they are also trying to replicate the same thing in the expression that we see from the various Chinese strategists. So now, because of these reasons, China, as we see, is changing its strategic posture to ensure its second strike capability by modernizing its nuclear capability and also relying on advanced conventional weapons. For example, counter space capability, cyber weapons, electronic warfare, and the whole purpose actually is to target missile defense. Whereas from the US point of view, the argument is the missile defense is important because of rogue nations like North Korea, Iran, and so on. But from the Chinese perspective, this missile defense threatens China. So therefore, you see the whole thing gets into a kind of a very complex dynamic. And as far as the US military leaders are concerned, they are describing China's nuclear modernization that we are talking about today as a strategic breakout that will provide Chinese leaders with the capability, and I quote, capability to execute any plausible nuclear employment strategy. So again and again, I am re-emphasizing I think as in India, and I will come back to points pertaining to India later, this notion that nuclear weapons are not for warfighting, we need to do a serious rethink because that seems to be the new trend. Now, what does this modernization of China involve? Many of you have touched upon it, but being a military person, I must go into a fair amount of detail in this. If you see the Arms Control Today report of 2022, the report projects that China aims to complete its nuclear modernization plans by 2035. And if China continues the pace of its nuclear expansion, it will likely field a stockpile of about 1,500 warheads by its 2035 deadline. China is building 3 silo fields for intercontinental ballistic missiles, which will feature at least 300 new silos in total for 2 Dongfeng missile variants, DF-41, a fixed or mobile ICBM with a multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicle capability that will carry up to 3 warheads per missile. China has compiled 120 ballistic missile systems, which include highly advanced hypersonic missiles. About 400 are nuclear armed, and this is expected, as I said, to increase to about 1,500 by 2035 or at the latest 2040. Compare this to a stagnant about 150 to 200 nuclear armed missiles that China had 2 decades ago. this expansion is happening in just a time span of 2 decades. China also, it's growing its inventory, and I would like to emphasize this point, of about 200 DF-26 ground-launched intermediate range ballistic missiles capable of carrying nuclear or conventional warheads to the Western Pacific, Indian Ocean, and the South China Sea, something that affects us directly. The report also talks about China seeking a low-yield nuclear weapon, and if so, it is likely to use the DF-26 for that purpose. China's military now commands the world's largest navy with about 355 ships, 58 submarines, up from 210 at the turn of the century. See the rapid pace of growth. It is expected to grow to 440 by 2030. Of the 58 submarines, 12 are nuclear, and this continues to grow as older models come out of service. China is assessed to have begun near continuous at-sea deterrence patrols with its 6 operational Jin-class nuclear-powered submarines, each of which can carry up to 12 submarine-launched ballistic missiles. China also has the world's 3rd largest air force with more than 2,000 aircraft, including the latest 5th-generation fighters. China is operationally fielding the H-6 November nuclear-capable bomber in 2020 as part of its nascent nuclear triad. The Chinese military is developing tactics and procedures for the bomber to support nuclear mission. In space, it has expanded its capability from 16 satellites, which could be used for military purposes, to more than 300. In 2021, China launched approximately 135 ballistic missiles for testing and training. In 1 year, 135 ballistic missiles, more than the rest of the world combined outside of conflict zones. Pentagon confirms that in July 2021, China tested a hypersonic glide vehicle paired with an ICBM in a demonstration of a fractional orbital system. The vehicle flew around the world in low orbit space for a total of 40,000 kilometers in roughly 100 plus minutes, 40,000 kilometers in roughly 100 plus minutes, and very nearly struck its target, which is inside China. To support its nuclear force expansion, China is pursuing the construction of fast breeder reactors and reprocessing facility. Despite China's public support for a fissile material cut-off treaty, China intends to use this infrastructure to produce nuclear-armed materials for the military in the near term. So if you see, one way or the other, there is a change. And now, China, which earlier kept majority of the launchers and missiles separated from the nuclear warheads, is ramping up this peacetime status by moving towards a launch on warning posture, a point which has been highlighted even by the Secretary of State of the United States of America. So, although at this stage, this posture is largely associated with exercises, but what is being exercised will be actualized in the event of a conflict. Now, PLA is pursuing next generation combat capabilities, which it calls intelligentized warfare, defined by the expanded use of AI and other advanced technologies at every level of warfare. And China is exploring the use of AI in target detection and identification systems, missile guidance, computer-assisted decision-making, autonomous weapons platform of various sorts, including unmanned air, sea, and ground vehicles. It is also reported to have developed a significant capability of offensive cyber operations, which it intends to employ at the onset of battle to disable the adversary's command and control, communication systems, which, has significant implications for strategic stability. China's views of strategic stability are described as increasingly revolving around the concept of ensuring mutual vulnerability with its nuclear-armed adversaries. Beijing views significant risks to its strategic stability, from the US, technological breakthroughs of new commitments to produce and deploy cutting-edge weapons. So, therefore, with all this, what does it mean for India? Well, the scale at which China is developing both its conventional and nuclear forces simultaneously, the heat is being felt by countries across oceans. And here, India is sharing a long unresolved boundary with China, and we have been locked in this face-to-face configuration with them for quite some time now, with no resolution in sight. So quite clearly, India needs to radically rethink the way it is strategizing and planning its own defenses. I spoke about, this notion of nuclear weapons are not meant for warfighting, needs a rethink. You may recall how the Islamic Republic of Pakistan in 2007-8 came out with a new concept of warfighting in response to India's so-called cold start operations. And what was that new concept of warfighting? Essentially, to bring down the nuclear threshold from the top and expand the scope of sub-conventional operations from below, and thus compress the space for conventional war. And there is no doubt that India faced a dilemma on how should it respond to this Pakistan's development of tactical nuclear weapons. Should it shift from massive retaliation to a proportional retaliation? We had our questions. Should it develop a counterforce capabilities? We had those questions. And now when we are seeing this intertwining, as I say, of nuclear and conventional capability with China, we clearly need to rethink the way we do our defensive planning.
Request General Saha to kindly.
Okay, I will just quickly wrap up, sir.
Thank you.
The question is, how does India deal with this vulnerability which is there as a consequence of the conventional asymmetry with China? I think we need to think. What is the potential of nuclear weapons? Where does it fit into the scheme? I know we don't talk about nuclear proliferation, but we certainly talk about defense, so don't we? And likewise, the asymmetries that we have in AI, cyber, and space capabilities. We need to manage or deal with this tricky trading relationship that we have got into with China, because clearly, again and again, we find ourselves getting stuck in this. And obviously, with this tricky trading relationship, when the year in which we had Galwan, we all know how our trade with China increased. And along with this trading relationship is the tricky diplomatic relationship. Since it's come time for me, so I'll just wrap up now. So let me highlight, last but not the least, is the intricate integration that we are seeing between Chinese and Pakistani military capability and this two-front war that India faces. Can India play the David to outmaneuver this Goliath combining the two? Or if you want to take an example from Indian history, can it find a technique of Velpari of the South, who ruled over Paramgunadu in the hills with tribals and stood firm against the Chera, Cholas, and Pandyas? On that note, I will finish here with my sincere thanks to Amity and CAPS. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, General Subratha. That was indeed very, very educative and very enlightening. I must say that the thoughts which have been shared by you as a guest speaker today
So there seems to be some disruption. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are, Colonel Bakshi.
Sure. Thank you very much, Saha. The thought shared by the guest speaker are highly illustrative with insightful perspective on the Chinese nuclearization and game plan is very edifying and thought-provoking to benefit us in fine dimensional measure. Thank you, sir. The next guest speaker, ladies and gentlemen, of great name and fame, not only in India, but acknowledged national and global identity, is Dr. Manpreet Sethi, Distinguished Fellow at the Center for Air Power Studies. I shall briefly introduce her. She is a Distinguished Fellow at CAPS, leading the project on nuclear security. Expertise and specialization embodies over 100 papers in academic journals of repute to her credit on nuclear energy, strategy, non-proliferation, disarmament, arm control, and ballistic missile defense. Her book, Nuclear Strategy, India's March Toward Credible Deterrence, is deemed essential reading at many war college. And this was also foundation for my PhD when I was doing that in 2015. She has participated in all flagship nuclear policy conferences in USA, Russia, European Union, China, and India. Member of Prime Minister's informal group on disarmament in 2012 and of the Executive Board of the Indian Pugwash Society. She has also been part of several Track 2 initiatives. She is currently on the board of Asia Pacific Leadership Network and a consultant with Global Nuclear Abolition Forum. She is also a founding board member of Women in Nuclear India. She is recipient of prestigious K. Subramaniam Award, and in a rare honor for a civilian on Air Force Day, she was commended by Chief of Air Staff for her dedication and professional ability. May I request Dr. Manpreet Sethi to kindly deliver a talk.
Thank you very much, sir. And it's such an honor to be on a panel with such luminaries. Good morning to all of you and to the students who are really going to be the ones who will be challenged by the new nuclear China that we are beginning to see emerge in our neighborhood. Now, I think several speakers have already spoken about what is new in what is happening in China's nuclear capability. But I think I do want to start by flagging the thought that it's not easy to know nuclear China. You know, China is very opaque on many issues, and particularly on the nuclear issue. It likes to, you know, keep its cards very close to its chest. There is a lot of speculation which is happening on many of these dimensions. We are seeing some capability changing on the ground, which has been evident for a period of time. But quite a lot of this is also a smokescreen for what China perceives is going to be beneficial for itself. So I do think China is quite like a black box. Nuclear China is quite like a black box, and we are all trying to feel it from our sense, just as, you know, others tend to say that India is the elephant and everybody feels different parts of the elephant to decide what it is like. Amongst the P5 countries, China is the least communicative on its size, on its status, and on its capabilities. So while the others keep demanding a certain amount of transparency about China, it has not been transparent. Though we are beginning to see a relative transparency, it's letting you see what it wants you to see, and therefore arrive at your conclusions about it. Now, China has been a nuclear country for the last 59 years. And when Mao started out, it was the idea of minimalism and defensiveness. So a small nuclear arsenal, we all remember he said 6 nuclear weapons is all that China needs, and a certain defensive posture that they adopted, including learning from the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis of the fact that the threshold for the US to take any damage is going to be very low. So therefore the numbers, they didn't have to focus so much on in that period of time. And they kept opacity as the way in which they were going to enhance their deterrence. But if you see some of the recent developments now, we do see a change in what appears to be happening in China. Deterrence, rather than just opacity, seems to be coming now through display. They are no longer hiding their capability, but they're displaying certain aspects of that capability. And Xi Jinping, particularly from the time he came in 2013-14, has had that entire thing about wanting to build a strong nation with a strong military. And within that strong military, he finds that nuclear weapons tend to play a role. So we see a greater emphasis on nuclear capabilities, including on their white papers or on national defense, which give you some inkling of what their nuclear, the thinking is all about. So we are seeing that for deterrence through assured second strike, as well as for stature, for both these dimensions, and I think General Sahab did mention that these are the two primary drivers which are taking them towards what we are seeing in today's times. So they're looking for assuredness of retaliation, survivability of their deterrent capability in view of what the US seems to be doing with its strategies, like putting its conventional warheads on strategic missiles, which China is worried about, they're reaching them and hitting out at their nuclear assets. Also the American missile defense and how China is going to be able to then inflict unacceptable damage if the US believes that it can protect itself through a missile defense. So therefore, we are seeing this kind of a capability expansion that's happening. I would say for a long period of time, China was focused on building its missile capabilities. So whether it was numbers, whether it was range, whether it was accuracy of those missiles, whether it was penetrability of those missiles in order to be able to penetrate and saturate a US missile defense. But today's times, what the Americans are telling us is that the focus is much more on nuclear warhead numbers. Now, since China is going to be deploying MIRVed missiles, where one missile can carry multiple warheads, a certain increase in numbers was to be expected. But the sighting of these silos, which has been mentioned by several speakers earlier, the sighting of these three silos where the numbers are going to expand rapidly is what is beginning to cause a certain amount of anguish in everyone's mind. But China could well be playing the shell game with these silos. It is letting the silos be seen by the satellites to create a sense of, fear in the other countries about expanding numbers, but there is no guarantee that each one of those silos is actually going to have a missile or a MIRVed missile, and therefore it could well be playing the shell game by having this kind of a capability being shown. So the kinds of challenges that I see China presenting itself to us and to the world today are essentially changes that are happening in two things. One is commingling of their conventional and nuclear missiles. During the Cold War period, we saw the US and USSR going to a great length to keep their conventional and nuclear capabilities separate. But what China is doing is commingling that capability, essentially making the PLA rocket force the custodian of all their missiles, co-locating some of them in their bases. Several of their missiles are dual use capable, and they are showing through their exercises a certain amount of combat readiness to shift from one warhead to another. That's what they're trying to, show to the world, to say we can do this very quickly. So it is creating ambiguity as a part of its deterrence strategy by commingling of their missiles. And the other thing that China is doing is creating risks because of this ambiguity. And it's not worried about the risks it's creating. Rather, it is seeing these risks as good for deterrence. And therefore, they believe that creating this ambiguity is actually going to enhance the deterrence for them. So the US will always be worried about what it's going to hit at the other end, whether its intention was to hit a conventional, a force on the other end. But if it ends up hitting something which is nuclear, then the risks go up. And by creating these risks, it's trying to deter the US from undertaking all of those actions. Now, what are the implications for India? And obviously, there are downstream implications of what China is doing. We are having this discussion precisely because we are worried about how this might be impacting us in the long run. But I think instead of taking everything that the US tells us on this at face value, it's very important for us to arrive at our own understanding of what China is doing and how it's going to impact some of our own deterrent capability. Now, some of the speakers have said about, we need a revision of our doctrine. And some of the dimensions, particularly, is NFU. But before I come to that, there are these two questions in which I would frame what is the revision that we need. Do we need a revision of India's numbers, changing from credible minimum deterrence to a maximalist position? I don't think so. I don't think we need to match nuclear numbers, one for one. That is not what nuclear weapons are meant for. These are weapons of mass destruction, and as long as you have the survivability to cause unacceptable damage to the other side, the numbers game can't take you very far. And rather, by adding numbers, you're also adding to the problems of safety and security, which can be rather problematic. So I think we don't need to match numbers one by one. Our numbers are expanding at a certain pace in any case over a period of time, and they should suffice based on the understanding that we arrive about what we need for credibility of that deterrence, particularly keeping survivability in mind. The second question that is often raised is, does India need to change its no first use? And really, I mean, when you get down to understanding what are we trying to achieve by changing no first use, do we think China is going to stop creating incursions at the border and create these problems for us by having a first use doctrine? And if that is our major worry, that this is what they keep doing, the territorial salami slicing, the fear that could be happening with China, then we have to focus on building our conventional capability to deter that from happening. By changing our no first use and by suggesting first use, we are not going to be able to deter that. Do we believe Pakistan when it says first use of nuclear weapons and does problems for us? You know, General Saha mentioned that 2007-8, Pakistan came up with its new concept of war fighting and the idea of tactical nuclear weapons, which it tested in 2011 and threw it out at us. Did that stop us from doing the surgical strikes? Did it stop us from doing the airstrikes when we felt the need to do that? And do we think China will not, take those steps if it feels it necessary? So therefore, NFU becomes, I think, a very easy whipping boy to say that if we change the NFU, then everything gets sorted out. After all, NFU change is not just dropping the no from first use, no. We have to build a credible first use arsenal. Only then will we look credible. And a credible first use arsenal means a large number of missiles, a large warhead stockpile, a good ISR capability, good logistics to carry out a first strike. We would need very good accuracy of our missiles. We have liberated ourselves from all of these requirements by having a no first use doctrine, because really the only credible use of nuclear weapons can be when the use has happened against you. For any political or military leader to be the first user of nuclear weapon is going to be a very difficult proposition. There are very many dilemmas that come for the first user. When are you going to use it? Where are you going to use it? How are you going to use it? Counter value, counter force. What will be beneficial? So having liberated ourselves from all of this, I think we have a sound doctrine in our no first use. What is necessary to deter China is essentially, I think, 2 or 3 things. One is moving towards credibility of our nuclear deterrence, which means doing many things. It means operationalization of Agni 5. It means having enough number of SSBNs as a deterrent force with good range of the SLBMs on those missile boats, ruggedization of our missile launchers, survivability, whether it's through silos, tunnels, deception, dispersal, however much is required, the focus needs to be on survivability. Penetrability of our missiles. So having MAVD as well as MIRVed missiles is necessary. Also improving our command and control, ISR communications capability, and building enough redundancies into all of them. And this is not a mean task by any standards. We also need at the second level conventional modernization to raise the nuclear threshold. We don't want to reduce the threshold by suggesting either use of TNWs or going in for first use. And lastly, we need at the political level encouraging US and China to indulge in some kinds of arms control. Because if there is some arms control between US and China, that itself will have a benign influence on the region. We need to ourselves explore platforms for engagement at the nuclear level with China. It has been mentioned China does not regard us as a nuclear weapon state. It always tells us you are not a legitimate nuclear weapon state because you are not party to the NPT, and it would not allow you to join the NPT as a nuclear weapon state. That's a roadblock that we seem to have. But I think if we can think of some out-of-the-box ideas about how India can have itself accommodated. And this can largely happen perhaps not at the bilateral level, but indulging in some kind of statement making at multilateral levels, like the SCO, like the G20, where some kind of a nuclear statement that is made in which both China and India, along with many other countries, are present. That can be one way of circumventing them and getting us a backdoor entry into China's thinking. And last of all, I think what Air Marshal Chopra said, we have to avoid being sucked into an arms race. There's an opportunity cost for everything. And I think overspending on the nuclear deterrent capability, which beyond a point doesn't take you anywhere, is something that we must keep our eyes clearly focused on, and focus instead on investing wisely in conventional capability buildup, which is really going to be the one which will be usable for holding China's hand on the conventional as well as at the nuclear level. I'll stop here. Thank you very much, sir, for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Manpreet Sethi. It was for such an incisive and insightful coverage of this complex topic in hand, especially your reputation for developing our own deterrence level to that extent. Thank you very much. I shall now invite Major General Dr. S.P. Asthana, Sena Medal, Visit Seva Medal, to deliver a special address seated by an introduction, a renowned and recognized defense analyst and strategist of the country. He is globally acknowledged strategic and security analyst who has authored over 400 publications, former Director General Infantry, Head of Training Team, Defense Service Staff College, Wellington, telecommutator, speaker in various strategic military forums, UN organizations, think tanks, and university. Currently on Governing Security Council, Confederation of Education Excellence, International Organization of Education Development, and other UN organizations. On Advisory Board of Global Advisors Consultant Corporation. Is member of Expert Group Challenges Forum, IOED, representative in UN headquarters, Vienna, Austria. Chief Instructor, USI of India, distinguished expert, Bharat Center of Canada and Bharat Media LLC, USA. Awarded twice by President of India, twice by United Nations CEE Excellence Award for Nation Building by Governor of Haryana, awarded International Diplomacy and Global Conflict Resolution by IOED twice. A consultative body of ECOSOC and International Police Commission, IPC India, by former Prime Minister of Moldova. May I request the General to kindly commence his address, please.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. My sincere thanks to Amity University, Dr. Chauhan, Dr. Silvamurthy, General Ghadyok, Air Marshal Chopra, organizers of the webinar from Amity University and CAPS, and most importantly, our dear students who are the main beneficiaries and who are the future leaders. Speaking to the younger generation always rejuvenates us with a great hope that they will make a better India than what our generation gave it to them. Now, coming on to the topic, a lot has been spoken. I will only give the strategic context to that without repeating what has been spoken. Firstly, in today's world, between US and China, there is a strategic competition, which we call it as Cold War 2.0. Earlier, we thought that Cold War 1.0 between US and Russia would have ended with breakup of USSR. But with Biden administration, what has happened is Cold War 1.0 and 2.0 have got mixed up. The focus, the global focus has shifted to Russia, Ukraine, as well as US-Russia nuclear competition, and has given an opportunity to China to progress its development of comprehensive national power, including the nuclear power, with no focus on itself, because the focus has shifted elsewhere. To put it in context, in May this year, there was an agreement signed between Russia and China, which says that Russia is going to give enriched uranium for 3 years. And the percentage of this enrichment will be about 30%. Now, this is a game changer in a manner that what various speakers have spoken, that okay, China will have 1,500 nuclear weapons by 2035. And as of now, it has got anything between 410 to 10,000. Anybody can make a guess, as was mentioned by many other speakers because of the opacity. But the fact was that the timelines and their enrichment capability was not matching this requirement earlier. But with this agreement, the requirement is that they will be able to produce in the near term, in next 3 years, 50 nukes per year. That will take them to the first target, and thereafter the capacity will increase, and he will be able to achieve with the kind of figures which have been spoken by various speakers. So this is one part of it. The second issue is that it had something called as counter blackmail strategy when we talk of the Chinese nuclear strategy. Now, this counter blackmail strategy was a blackmailing, avoid blackmailing from US. Then it developed to minimum credible deterrence. And now the indicators are, it is moving on to limited nuclear deterrence. And it also believes that the nuclear weapons will not end a war or will not conclude a war, which I think is the right thinking. And therefore, there is a need to increase the conventional weapon alongside. And that's why, as somebody mentioned, you have the largest Navy, Chinese Navy as of today. And therefore, they did not lose focus on that. Now, the second issue which I want to highlight is that this Chinese strategy and expansion, it puts disarmament, that is the global disarmament, on reverse gear. Now, how it happens? Firstly, if China would like, if China has it say, it would like the world to believe that its nuclear program, expansion, policies, everything is absolutely benign. And when the Chinese representative in United Nations was speaking last year, he clearly highlighted that US is pursuing Cold War mentality. It's making the global deployment of nukes, and therefore we have a problem of the instability, and therefore he tabled the Global Security Initiative. And he gave up absolute logic as to why he is the guy who can actually put the global stability in order. Now, that was the logic. But if you go deeply, it has very clearly, shall we say, firstly, it doesn't sign CTBT and gives the logic that America has not ratified it. The day they ratify, I will also ratify. He signed it, but he's not ratified it. And he also gives a logic that India and Pakistan have not signed it. So they have not signed NPT. So therefore, there is no reason. And therefore, indirectly, it's giving a logic for its nuclear expansion. It also remains out of the INF treaty. Now, Americans have told them many times, but they have smartly moved away. With the result, they have now no restrictions, whereas the others, that is Russia and US, have some kind of restrictions, although they are recently suspended because of Russia and Ukraine war in some manner. He also gives the logic that, as was mentioned, I think that was all, that point was mentioned, that let the others reduce the disarmament, the US and Russia reduce to a level which is somewhere near me, and then I will talk about thinking of not expanding or otherwise. And we all know that it also proliferates despite signing NPT. And that accusation has got many circumstantial evidences. And therefore, it has certainly, its expansion plan has put the disarmament in the reverse gear. The failure of 10th NPT conference was also, I think, attributed to all of them not getting into some kind of agreement. Now, when it comes to India, we must analyze one point, that India is the only country in the world which has two nuclear neighbors. Both are belligerent neighbors, both are in collusive support of each other, and with both we don't have an unsettled border. We have an unsettled border. And therefore, our position is unique. And with that unique position, certainly this puts the two-front threat on India with a nuclear overhang in some manner or the other. But the silver lining is that despite 3 years of standoff, not a word on nuclear by both sides indicates that there is some kind of nuclear maturity, and it is also indicative of certain other things. Now, what that certain other things are, that India itself also has minimum credible deterrence. We have also developed our triad, nuclear triad. We also are developing the Agni. We have developed Agni 5 and they are going on to Agni 6. With that, even if you have a couple of missiles which can reach Beijing and Shanghai, China dare not do anything as far as the nuclear threat is concerned. And therefore, I don't think they have even played that nuclear threat so far. That we have to give it to them. Now, the other strategy regarding disarmament which China is propagating is, it is getting along, trying to get a, firstly, it's very active in disarmament arena. Secondly, one of the activeness is that it wants P5 to negotiate with Southeastern Asian countries to declare that area as nuclear free zone. Now, uncomfortable for India, he is not talking about South Asia. He is only talking about Southeast Asia. The reason being, indirectly, what he is trying to tell US is, don't deploy your nuclear weapons in South Korea, don't do it in Japan, don't help these guys, and don't pose a threat to me. That is indirectly, and he is taking the benign stand as to, he is trying to make everybody stable, and he is taking a lot of initiatives as far as disarmament is concerned. A point was spoken about India's no first use policy. I will just read one para. I totally agree with Dr. Sethi on this issue, that I think our policy is reasonably okay. Amongst other things, the Indian no first use policy, there is a clause which says, it also lays down that in the event of a major attack against India or Indian forces anywhere by biological or chemical weapon, India will retain the option of retaliating with nuclear weapons. So therefore, it is embedded in our policy that in case of an awkward situation, we have an option. So I don't think the policy is totally outdated, as she very rightly mentioned. Now, this year also, this May month, in fact, happens to be the 25th year of Project Shakti. That is when we actually became a nuclear power or a nuclear state. And therefore, I think this is the time, as somebody very rightly mentioned, we need to have collaborations. Firstly, we need to do capacity building in conventional domain too. This point was said. But in addition to that, we certainly need better nuclear management in terms of the ISR capabilities, C4 ISR capabilities, in logistics capability, the surveillance capabilities, and shall I say, all dimensions of the nuclear as well as the conventional power. This is also an era of collaborations. We need to build a lot on that issue. Now, interestingly, about 3 days back, in one of the international journals was interviewing me, and they posed a very interesting question. Why doesn't India start a disarmament initiative in South Asia? And my answer was very clear, that when it comes to China's nuclear program, it is US-centric. And it is a big power contestation. The disarmament has got no meaning unless the big powers actually think about it, and as of now, they are not. So therefore, India, which is not even recognized by China as a nuclear power, I don't think an initiative is, firstly, it serves any interest as far as India is concerned for the time being. And secondly, I don't think China will agree to that. So therefore, a talk of this kind, I think, is meaningless in the current context as far as we are concerned. As far as their no first use policy is concerned, they may say, they are also saying that the whole world should adopt the policy which I have adopted, that is no first use. But if you read between the lines, his no first use says that anyone no first use is for non-nuclear status countries and for nuclear-free zones. And it is trying to declare Southeast Asia as nuclear-free zone. So he says, okay, I'm ready for net nuclear, no first use, but you declare Southeast Asia as nuclear-free zone, and I will not use it anywhere. That is to keep ASEAN in good humor. But as far as India is concerned, he doesn't make any of these commitments. And even if he had made so, he has broken so many CBMs in past. There is no guarantee that it will not break many more CBMs, even if he makes some kind of commitment to us.
General
So
Asthana,
I will stop here. And thank you very much for patient listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, General Shashi Asthana. I know that you have tremendous amount of knowledge and material, reservoirs of it, which you have been speaking at the United Nations platform and other European nations, and they have eulogized, in fact, your kind of expose which has been given on various subjects. And we are very grateful to you for this very invigorating discourse, as usual, which you have always been given to Amity students and to the faculty here, and sharing your professionally intellectual perspective, highly stimulating and critical issues, very incisive and causative analysis, as always. General Asthana touched upon counter blackmail strategy. Now, this is something that I think we all should take note. And then he spoke about the credible nuclear deterrence, limited nuclear deterrence, that is a graduated form, incrementally taken on by China. He also said that, well, the expansion does not debar China from its conventional capabilities, with the general, that is General Saha spoke about. And after him, we also had Dr. Mantri speaking about it. And he spoke also about a very interesting aspect of the two-front war, which John Saha also touched upon briefly, and collusive nuclear neighbors. What India should be doing, the nuclear-free zone, Southeast Asia, indirect blackmail and threat to United States, that we are trying to catch up with you. Our silos are there. What Dr. Mantri said, that he's trying to not reveal probably as to what is there, whether silos are empty or they have the nuclear capability, which is invested over there. It's really not really very clear. Therefore, putting a dilemma, and she used the word of opacity, obfuscation effect, strategic effect. The general also spoke about the NFU, that it's embedded in the in our nuclear doctrine, second strike capability. And now, since we've completed 25 years of Project Shakti, we need better nuclear management, ISR, logistics, nuclear organization, the Strategic Force Command. That's very important because that happens to be a very pivotal organization in the diachronic framework. I'll just take a minute because there was a little bit of a blink over here at Wellington, where I'm perched at the present moment. We had General Saha, who had spoken, I think, very interesting aspects of the paradigm shift, implications for the United States, that's assured retaliation, nuclear posturing by China, brazen showcasing. Well, it, I think, tends to manifest everywhere. And as researchers and as strategists and defense analysts, each one of us, I think, is talking about it. But very interesting aspect General Saha brought out, the modifying, expanding, diversifying, intertwining nuclear capability into the conventional strike capability. I think all speakers have brought out, but this, I think, has been highlighted very nicely. So all researchers kindly keep this in mind, doing research on China, especially all those 6 researchers of the AIDSS under Brigadier Anand. He spoke about the Eisenhower Doctrine against the Russians, the China trying to enhance its military capability against United States, ascendancy, balance of strategic force levels, modernization of nuclear strategic plan, which it has by 2035. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you must have, some of you must have heard about and read about the white paper. How white and how much has China revealed in those white papers has got to be seen. He also spoke, I think, the kind of statistics given out by General Saha, the mind-boggling. He spoke about nuclear arsenal of 200 GLIRBMs affecting Southeast Asian regions, all targeting the Plan F and that is the PLA Navy and the PLA Air Force. He spoke about it in great detail with nuclear power submarines, SLBMs, third largest air force, stealth aircraft, and bombing facilities by the bombers. China is very good in reverse engineering, and now its civil military fusion has also been showing tremendous results, which General Raj Shukla spoke about the other day. I think a very fine dimension, which our researchers, two of them, who are doing research in outer space weaponization, 300 satellites in space, fast breeder reactors producing nuclear arms for Israel. I think those are very interesting aspects which have been brought out by General Saha. And Dr. Manpreet, of course, spoke about the ambiguity and deterrence. She also spoke about the Merc missile. And she said that India, I think, doesn't require to change its ideology or the nuclear doctrine very much. But we certainly do require to enhance our capability with the Agni 5-6, SSBNs, Merc missiles, ISR, redundancy being built up, ruggedization of missile capability and survivability. The word I try to buttress is survivability, where she's very correct in saying that. And at the political level, she said that China and its armed control policy, I think we require to speak to China, not only on border issues, but your defense minister, I think very astutely addressed this particular issue about the border and told China that we can talk about many other issues which are pending, but first solve the boundary issue, which I think is very correct in the perspective in which he spoke. India and China must discuss nuclear disarmament. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we come on to the next speaker. That is Dr. Ms. Roshan Kanijo. We would like to invite her. And before I ask her to speak, a brief introduction about Dr. Roshan. She happens to be an Assistant Director of Research of the USI New Delhi, which is a strategic analyst, and she is focusing on very, very specific areas, that is of security, nuclear issues, Indo-Pacific region, niche technologies, and South Asia. She has authored and edited books, monographs, and occasional papers on complexities and challenges of nuclear India, Indo-Pacific region security dynamics, and the challenges associated with it. And she has also spoken about Nuclear Security Summit, the challenge continues, China's modernization processes, that is military modernization. She is co-editor of the USI Strategic Yearbook presented paper on CIISS Beijing, CICIR, that is China Institute Contemporary International Relations, Beijing Research Institute for National Security Affairs, RINSA, South Korea. I can go on like this, Dr. Roshan, but I would like to stop because I think we're just overshooting time. So may I request now the gracious lady to kindly give a talk, please. Dr. Roshan Kanijo.
Thank you so much, General Gadiok, Chancellor Dr. Chauhan, General Gadiok, Air Marshal Chopra, panelists, ladies and gentlemen, and especially the students who have joined in this seminar. Now, this China's nuclear modernization is a very relevant topic in today's changing geopolitical milieu. Historically, if we see that China first tested a nuclear device in 1964, but that time, after that, the modernization has been a little slow because of Mao's initial reluctance, as he branded them as paper tigers and relying more on human powers. But subsequently, with the Korean War and the initial Taiwan Strait crisis, all these became a turning point for the modernization processes. And we see that during Xi Jinping's tenure, we find that there has been drastic changes which has taken place. If we see the rocket force, what he has said would do the function, and I quote, China's core force for strategic deterrence, a strategic buttress for China's position as a major power, and an important cornerstone for defending national security, unquote. So here, amongst the three aspects, the most important thing which needs to be seen is the indicator which he is giving that the nuclear weapons will reinforce China's position as a major power. So it can be construed that in conflicts, China may use coercion through flaunting of its nuclear weapons. Secondly, he also says about nuclear force as a core force for strategic deterrence. Now, deterrence, when China talk about it, is very different from the concept which is taken by the Westerners. According to the Chinese deterrence is a continuation of politics to achieve certain political goals. So the relationship between the two, the politics and the deterrence, is one of goals and means. The deterrence is fundamental goal is to stop an opponent's certain behavior. And they prefer the means through coercion or through threat. For them, this is important. And how do they do it? They don't believe in oral threats, but they believe in threats expressed by a display of military strength, because they consider it as credible. So their concept of deterrence consists of psychological, political, military, all these are combined together, along with the CNP. Till now, China has used only the economic coercion to achieve the political objectives. It has not dwelt into the nuclear coercion because primarily it is much stronger militarily than all its neighbors. However, if it's as it considers Taiwan as a core area, if it has a skirmish with the US, then we need to see whether it will try to use all the options which is available for it, including the nuclear coercion. To give an example, recently a war game was conducted by the Chinese, and their hypersonic missiles destroyed the US carrier fleets. Now, this may be for PSYOPs, but the fact is that the modernization process is looking into all these areas. So a lot of thought has gone in for these processes. And further, in the South China Sea, if you see, the US is already finding it more and more difficult to breach the A2AD lines of the Chinese. So now we come to the Chinese nuclear doctrine. We find that everybody has mentioned that the core Chinese nuclear doctrine has been NFU, minimum deterrent, lean and small nuclear force. But it has all changed. It has changed due to modernization, diversification, and increase in the weapons inventory. There is also the commingling and co-location of various conventional and nuclear missiles, which has already been spoken about. Now, what are the pointers to this? The question is, China's policy of minimum deterrent and about small and lean nuclear force is changing. The silos which have been talked about, maybe few of them are for the shell reason, but the number is quite huge. So they are increasing the ICBM strengths. And as we go in this presentation, you'll find there is also an increase in the number of IRBMs and ICBMs, IRBMs and MRBMs also. The second thing which needs to be noted is initially when Chinese developed the nuclear weapons, they used high yield nuclear weapons like 3.5 megaton as also thermonuclear warheads for mainly countering big assets for counter value targets. However, this has changed as now the newer version missile use low yield warheads and a precision guided missiles. Why are we requiring this? It is requiring for counter force targeting. And a case in point is the DF-26, which is an IRBM, can only be used in the regional conflict. That is, it has the potential to target India, Taiwan, and Japan. So they are going for a more hybrid kind of targeting, where there is counter force as well as counter value targeting. The other thing which needs to be taken into consideration is they are developing the capabilities towards rapid retaliation. So when they are developing this, what are they trying to do? Two things. Technologically, the missiles will be solid fuel, road mobile. operationally, the rocket force is conducting high alert duty drills. That means some of the missiles may be kept for ready to launch purposes. Now, this brings to the next question. That is, why are Chinese going on for launch on warning capabilities? For that, we need to see, firstly, do they have the capability to do that? What is required for a launch on warning capabilities? You need to have early warning radars as well as good space capabilities. Now, they have developed both these. The early warning radars are positioned in areas of Shangshan and Yuan counties in Shandong region. They have indigenously developed HQ-19 hit-to-kill mid-course missile deterrent systems. They also have 3 early warning satellites in orbit. That means they are slowly and steadily mastering the art of launch on warning capabilities. That means anything coming, they can be able to kill it. Nuclear modernization, as far as concerned, a lot of people have spoken about it. I would just like to highlight few things, and that is the regional paradigm. We find that DF-31 ICBMs are for the regional conflict. Secondly, there has been an increase in DF-26 IRBM. From mere 30 to now, they are more than 250. Now, the numbers may vary, but the fact that there is an increase in the number is a cause of concern because it is for the regional conflict. They also have developed anti-ship variants of both DF-21 and DF-26. The other important aspect which I would like to highlight is the significance of hypersonic. They have already proved the fractional orbital bombardment system, that is the FOBS. They already have operationalized their DF-17 hypersonic vehicles. Now, they are also increasing the number of DF-17s. Why is it that they are increasing this number? It needs to be pondered. Apart from that, all these hypersonic, they state that these are for dual use purpose. That is, it is not only for the conventional, but it is also for the nuclear use. So that is a question. Apart from that, another area which need to be highlighted, which most of till now I find that we have not highlighted is the drone section. Now, there was a news which stated that they have developed a Mach 7 MD-22 UAV, which can travel at a speed of hypersonic. Now imagine the drone having that kind of a speed. So they are testing and improvising hypersonic technology in a war footing. And this will have a major repercussion and impact the stability in the region. Because as we know, hypersonics do not give you the time to react as it goes with the speed of light. Other areas they have mentioned is the naval domain. If we see, we all know that they have the Jin class submarines, and they have got the JL2s and the SLBMs. I'll not talk more about it, but I would like to talk about is the air domain. The PLAF Air Force has been newly reassigned a nuclear mission, which do not hold good for us. Why? Because the bombers have a regional connotation, as it cannot reach the US. So they have strengthened their nuclear triad for regional conflict. You can see the H-6K has a dual-use nuclear conventional bomber. Then they are also developing H-6N, which can accommodate the nuclear capable air-launched ballistic missile. They already have H-6. Here we need to look into consideration. There was news in the past that China's Kashgar Air Base has constructed underground vault. Now, this underground vaults can hide nuclear weapons, warheads. Apart from that, it was further collaborated by the presence of the dual-use H-6 bombers. So I'm just trying to play out how China is developing its nuclear posturing. Apart from having an NFU, how the deployment procedure is going to be. I would like to dwell a little bit on the drone section.
Dr. Roshan,
Yeah.
could you kindly limit your
Yes.
please?
Just the drone section, I would like to tell you that recently there was a news that they had developed small low-cost nuclear reactors to power a swarm unmanned underwater vehicle. So this is a new thing which has come out and which might change the nuclear stability. As far as responses are concerned, everybody has spoken about it. We are strengthening our nuclear force structure, but we need to have enough nuclear delivery vehicles, especially in the counter value targeting, and that needs ICBM's numbers so that we are able to deter China. Similarly, in the naval domain, we need to have larger range of our SLBMs. Hypersonics is one area where we need to speed up the pace of development because this will be the game changer in future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roshan. I think what you've given out, is, again, mind-boggling like the other guest speakers. Oh my God, you really have gone into great amount of detail, and I think very enlightening with your kind of in-depth knowledge. You really are highly specialized in this domain, and I must convey my compliments to you. Very, very effusive comments given by you on China's nuclear modernization trends, which have got to be seen. I don't think so many of the students will be knowing what you have highlighted today. Excellent coverage, not only of the geostrategic and geopolitical breadth, but I'll say the inclusivity has been absolutely remarkable, madam. And what you spoke about, I'd just like to touch upon in a few seconds, nuclear button. I think that's a very important aspect of what Xi Jinping has been talking about, the deterrence with the nuclear button that he is going to, you use the word coercion. I think it is very relevant in the hybridity, the hybrid wars, autonomous wars that we are talking about in the environment of the spectrum of conflict. The threat manifestations, psychological, political, military, and intelligence, and now nuclear, which has been included in the third, that is being upgraded as part of the military doctrine of China. The Chinese war game, hypersonic missiles against United Nations, US Naval Task Force carrier. Yes, that was very much in the news, and China is now practically upping the ante, modernization, diversification, and higher inventory that is being processed by the Chinese military. And this all is being done basically for making sure that the military potential is leveraged to achieve upgradation and unipolar status. You spoke about the counter force targets, counter value targets, developing hybrid, rapid retaliation, high alert duty drills by the rocket forces. You're absolutely correct. It was there in the news. And well, I just hope that people understand about the rocket forces being close enough and being deployed against the Indian subcontinent, early warning radars, position close to the LAC, and satellites launch on warning, that is capabilities. Very relevant, extremely good kind of, I think, news and education to all our listeners today. You also spoke about hypersonic missiles as other guest speakers, and the anti-ship missile systems. All the inventories have now, I believe, being refurbished, and they are trying to upgrade so as to take on the regional, that is, dimensional conflict. I think that is very relevant of what you said about the PLAF and the drones, which you covered with great thoroughness, the bombers, the strength of the triad for regional conflict, and of course, the Kashgar Air Base. Air Marshal Anil Chopra also spoke about it the other day, about the underground, that is, nuclear base being developed. You know, ladies and gentlemen, we all have got to be privy to what China is doing. It does believe in great amount of surprise and deception, speaks a little bit less than the other nations. It has got a very good zippered policy, speaks less, but its intent and its execution is, as a communist country believing in totalitarian policies, I think is absolutely commendable the way it moves. And lastly, about the low cost, that is nuclear reactors from technologies being accentuated. I think, Madam, you have done great justice. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we come on to the next speaker, and that happens to be no one else but our own researcher. That is, we got Brigadier Rohin Bawa. Now, Brigadier Rohin Bawa happens to be a scholar, that is a brilliant researcher as part of AIDSS, who's pursuing his PhD on the dynamics of Chinese strategic culture and military negotiations. May I request Rohin to kindly deliver his talk, please. Brigadier Rohin Bawa.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank Dr. Chauhan, Dr. Selvamurthy, General Gediok, the entire team, MIT and CAPS for inviting me to be part of this very, very important and contemporary topic seminar. And it's a matter of indeed a great pride for me to be part of this panel amongst the, I would say, most distinguished panelists of the nation. During my 10-12 minutes or so, I shall be focusing on manifestation of Chinese strategic culture in its nuclear strategy. The concept of strategic culture refers to a nation's traditions, values, attitudes, patterns of behavior, habits, symbols, achievements, and particular ways of adapting to environment and solving problems with respect to the threat or the use of force. The strategic culture pertains to a people's distinctive style with a thinking about the problems of national security. In my talk, I shall be focusing on certain core elements of China's strategic culture. China, as you are aware, is a country with beliefs and convictions, and it can be expected to take actions consistent with its strategic culture. The mandate of heaven and the Middle Kingdom syndrome provide a sense of superiority. As a result, China has always viewed the world from a high vantage point. The Chinese emperor was envisioned as the pinnacle of political hierarchy, with all other state rulers serving as vassals. Visitors were expected to recognize their place in the Sinocentric world order by performing the ritual kowtow to acknowledge the emperor's superiority. China's strategic philosophy addresses two fundamental needs: the inviolability and the pursuit of rightful place under heaven. The defensive aspect aims to ensure inviolability, while the expansive aspect seeks to secure China's rightful place. These attributes, influenced by the yin-yang concept in Chinese philosophy, involve both negative, that is defensive, and positive, that is expansive elements. The defensive orientation to prevent invasion is evident in the construction of the Great Wall. However, at the same time, offensive orientation is apparent when China also simultaneously demanded tribute from surrounding so-called barbarian nations and expanded its territory. China viewed itself as the Middle Kingdom and considering foreign relations based on Confucian values, and at the same time expecting submission from lesser kingdoms in exchange for protection. Next is China's firm belief in historical mandate to establish supremacy. The century of humiliation galvanized China's ambition to eradicate discrimination and become a global power. The Chinese people have an extremely strong sense of victimhood due to their historical experience of aggression from the imperialist powers. China feels its actions are morally justified as it is seen as the unilateral victim. Hence, China has become somewhat paranoid that foreign countries are always trying hard to restrain China from becoming more powerful, and that China letting its guard down even slightly will result in invasion. Today, this narrative legitimizes the CCP power by portraying it as the only contemporary Chinese political party to effectively resist foreign aggression. The Chinese government and strategic thinkers want to overcome this sense of unfairness and revenge the humiliation. They believe China has a historical mandate to restore its place in the world order. And this ideology is spurring China to modernize its military and specifically the nuclear capabilities. Another aspect which number of analysts feel, wherein they say that China's strategic disposition can be characterized as having a dualistic strategic culture. The two main strands are Confucian mentioned one, that is conflict averse and defensive minded, and the general politics one, which favors military solutions and is offensive oriented. Both strands are operative and both influence to form a sort of a Chinese concept of active defense. And this concept paradoxically tends to dispose Chinese leaders to pursue offensive military operations as a result, as a primary alternative in pursuit of national goals, while rationalizing these actions as being purely defensive and last resort. When the conditions are right, the strategic defense will also include counterattack and offense. This strategy does not differentiate between defense and offense, as also does not rule out preemptive strike. While this strategy so far is not related to is only related to conventional domain as of now, however, analyzing China's nuclear modernization drive and posturing, clear reflections emerge, wherein China reaffirms support for complete disarmament and simultaneously is modernizing and diversifying nuclear delivery systems for a robust second strike, as also signaling ambiguity around its no first use, and is also reluctant to engage in disarmament measures. Another distinct facet of Chinese is that their use of stratagem and deception for deterrence. As you are aware, Sun Tzu had emphasized the importance of stratagem over physical force, stating that skill lies in subduing the enemy without fighting. To explore how traditional values of moral and psychological superiority can be aligned with modern nuclear condition, we need to examine the concept of Chinese deterrence. The rationale behind nuclear weapons, as we are all aware, is their non-use, as their primary purpose is deterrence. To achieve a credible deterrent posture, China is demonstrating both intention and capability, wherein it is expanding its nuclear capabilities, both in quantum and quality, from land and air delivery systems to include ballistic and cruise missile submarines, aligning with its unified deterrence concept. China is also progressing beyond minimum credible deterrence to executing a retaliatory nuclear counterattack or a robust deterrence strategy. This reflects China's strategic and political culture of adapting external conditions while maintaining its distinctive characteristics. Next aspect that I would develop on is the Chinese concept of indirect approach, where it is a number of speakers are also brought out, wherein it is arming rogue nations. In terms of foreign relations, China has traditionally held to the idea of working individually against weakened states, resorting to teaming up to counter stronger states, and strengthening relations with distant states in order to deal with neighbors whom it is at odds, as also preserving one's own state by having a foreign state attack another threatening state. This behavior reflects the Chinese stratagem of to kill with borrowed knife. Arming North Korea, Pakistan, and now Iran they're all endeavors to checkmate India and the US, as also Japan, by acting as a territorially contiguous link with all these rogue nations. The nuclear arming of both Pak and North Korea are perfect examples of how China unfolded this stratagem. It provided Pakistan with the capability to build nuclear weapons using highly enriched uranium cores, and simultaneously provided ballistic missile technology to North Korea. Thereafter, it played the vital role of a facilitator in exchange of respective technologies between these two nations, thereby boosting their nuclear programs. Another issue that I would like to delve upon is China's threat perception of its internal and external environment. China's political and military leaders see threats everywhere. This siege mentality results in elites viewing the foreign as well as domestic environments as treacherous landscape filled with threats and conspiracies. The handling of the Tiananmen unrest, the pro-democracy Hong Kong protest, campaign against corruption in China, and the excessive lockdown of zero COVID policy suggests the depth of regime's fear of domestic threats. China always believes itself surrounded by enemies, and this was true during Deng Xiaoping's China, and also holds true for Xi Jinping's China. In fact, Xi has instilled distrust within the party, the state, and even within the officers of the armed forces. The whole country is under surveillance through highly sophisticated systems of monitoring. Setting up more than 50 illegal police stations in 5 continents to monitor and threaten Chinese nationals living overseas clearly displays an immense sense of insecurity of the establishment. We also need to analyze the China's organizational culture. From its new security concept to its use of force, China goes to great lengths to emphasize its so-called moral righteousness, claiming that other countries are entirely responsible for the problems that have arisen. Through the massive and prolonged dissemination of this discourse through the propaganda apparatus, China has in effect inculcated in its own people the same ideas as its government. Probably this is why they do not strongly question their own discourse. In addition, the organizational culture of socialism is thought to have been influential in the total shifting of responsibility to the outside world. And inherent, I would like to mention that inherent in Marxism is the logic that no one can be held accountable as long as the motive is pure. In addition, the Chinese bureaucracy provides little opportunity to correct its own mistakes. Since there is no opposition party or media in China that freely can criticize the government authorities, society is flooded with self-praise and criticism of foreign countries pushed exclusively by the propaganda machinery. Therefore, the Chinese government does not hold itself responsible for consequences of its so-called righteous actions, even if they go wrong, but instead holds others responsible. Further, due to lack of domestic debates on such sensitive strategic matters, their political leaders remain bereft of sound policy advice from the nuclear experts. Next issue is the influence of leaders on the strategic culture of a state. A strategic culture of a state interacts with the operational code being followed by the actual leader. What kind of psychology, dispositions toward conflict and cooperation are held by the leaders and their relationship with the societal culture is imperative. In fact, the situational and conditional constraints as well as actions of other states also influences the choices of Chinese leaders. Strategic culture is ever evolving and is profoundly influenced by the personality and the worldview of its national leaders. The diabolic features of Xi Jinping's regime have been manifested in multifarious forms. China's unrelenting ambition of becoming global superpower by dislodging the USA and turning the world into a unipolar one is pushing humanity to the brink of an impending Chinese peril that also underlines rampant exploitation of natural resources globally for the embellishment of China. Xi Jinping's malignant and malevolent approach towards relationship with the world based on sheer muscle and money power is being loathed by most people of the world, except for some corrupt, power-hungry politicians and dictators in some countries. Another
Rohit, may I request you to kindly sum up, please?
just last 2 minutes, sir.
Okay.
Next issue is China's security policies are influenced not only by their own understanding of their strategic culture, but also their perceptions of the strategic cultures of the other nations. Here, the case in point is they view that US is their primary threat. And because of this perception, it is trying to contain and undermine China in its peaceful rise and prevent unification with Taiwan. In fact, they feel that US is an expansionist and a hegemon nation. Besides, it's having a predisposition for strategic misdirection. And this refers to the so-called the earlier strategic defense initiative of the Star Wars. They strongly feel that this was a ruse against the Russians. They didn't have any intention to deliver this, but the alarm over it prompted the Russians to overspend, and that ultimately led to their collapse. And they also feel that US is intent on pursuing a similar tack with China. And Chinese analysts are also highly skeptical of the US so-called intelligence failure on the India's nuclear test. They feel that they're convinced that these are devious plots to throw China off balance, and US goal is assumed to be destruction or dismemberment of China. China feels that on the economic front, it is able to stand up to the US. However, on the nuclear front, it still needs to bridge the wide gap and hence the relentless pace of its modernization. To offset disparity, presently China has adopted a sort of a hedging strategy by fostering close alliances with Russia and collaborating with rogue nations to keep the US and its other potential adversaries in check. China's strategic culture has distinct preference for secrecy and deception. Hence, it will always maintain ambiguity in nuclear deterrence issues, which will keep the adversaries guessing regarding its actual nuclear strength. Since all warfare is based on deception as per China, it will maintain effective strategic communication not only to make others truly believe, but also truly fear its nuclear forces. To conclude, I would like to mention that unique strands of Chinese strategic culture of self-proclaimed civilizational supremacy, mandate of heaven, leading to a staunch notion of achieving a rightful place, unrelenting desire to establish supremacy, unprecedented scale of weaponization of rogue nations along with hegemonic expansion is creating a highly unstable security situation. And this situation is getting exacerbated in the absence of any mechanism for internal debate with absolute powers vested in one leader. Hence, any irrational decision pertaining to use of nuclear weapons under the backdrop of extreme hypersensitivity to internal threats and high levels of suspiciousness and mistrust of external players is a distinct possibility. Thank you, sir. I finished.
Thank you. Thank you, Rohan. That was excellent. Absolutely. And I think, you see, they are not I should say, a very large segment of our strategists and defense analysts, I think, in the country are not given, in fact, to the Chinese strategic culture. And because I think you are not only a researcher, you've done very incisive, I think, research, and you've gone into very in-depth understanding on the principles of Chinese strategic culture of inviolability and the rightful place in heaven. The yin-yang philosophy, what you mentioned, I think is very correctly brought out by the historical perspective of Confucianism. And they try to justify, you know, its military expansionism, aggression to avenge, humiliation. Humiliation seems to be the cornerstone. And Brigadier Anand, who happens to be our head of department, that is of AIDSS, I found him also speaking about this because he's taken out a wonderful book in which he's spoken about some of these very important issues about Chinese strategic culture, which, ladies and gentlemen, we, I think, require to understand, because if you want to know your adversary in the correct perspective, I think you must try to understand the kind of philosophy and ideologies that is very relentlessly pursuing. Chinese nuclear stratagem embedded in a strategic, credible deterrence, retaliatory nuclear attack. The paradigmatic, I think, concepts is very much in vogue. The policy and moral righteousness, information warfare, covert strategies, overseas monitoring, its people as to how they behave and are they anti-national. But all of this is part of what I think Rohan very brilliantly brought out. Thank you very much, Rohan. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we get on to a little bit out of time. So I'll request Brigadier Krishnan to kindly restrict. He's another very brilliant officer who's doing his research at AIDSS on chemical, biological, radiological, that is nuclear threat manifestation. So I'll request Brigadier Krishnan to kindly keep it short and stick to timelines, please. Thank you very much. Krishnan, go ahead, please.
So thank you very much, sir. Firstly, thank you to have given me an opportunity to speak amongst these very eminent people. I would say that after hearing all the panelists, I'm a realist, and I would say I would first like to understand why China thinks or China does what it is doing, and then probably understand as to what India should do, the way forward as far as India is concerned. Now, the Chinese nuclear arsenal appears to be expanding and modernizing substantially for the last few years. China had maintained only about 20 silos-based ICBMs, but recent evidence indicates that the country has been constructing more than 200 new missile silos. China's current program to modernize and update its nuclear arsenal is moving at an unprecedented speed and scale. As you're well aware, modernization of nuclear capabilities involve multiple aspects which needs to be seen in totality, like delivery capability, warheads, early warning, training, and missile defense. China has rapidly expanded its PLARF capability. However, it is in the process of further catching up as far as sea and air-based delivery methods are concerned. That's what my research says. Against a well-organized and well-equipped Air Force and Navy of the US. Now, what are the geopolitical compulsions which, as far as China is concerned, which I think what China is doing? For decades, China has worried about how US military capabilities like missile defense and conventional precision strike weapons could undermine the credibility of China's capacity to retaliate against a nuclear attack. New improvements of US capabilities constantly remind Chinese nuclear experts of their nuclear deterrent potential vulnerability. Under the current leadership, China's continued rise is coupled with opening disputes with Western countries over issues like human rights, democratic values, rule of law, and international norms. These developments have had Chinese leadership to conclude that China faces a new geopolitical reality in which the Western countries are deliberately creating trouble and making excuses to demonize and contain China, fearing that the country's rise could challenge the West's dominance in the international arena. Believing that the Western hostility is a result of a bigger structural changes in the international system, Beijing feels the only solution is to further consolidate its own power until Western countries acknowledge the new reality that China's success and strength are beyond doubt. These developments fuel concerns that China's traditional nuclear strategy premised on a limited nuclear arsenal for assured retaliation and no first use policy is undergoing a major shift. Until recently, China has pursued a strategy of assured retaliation and has developed a relatively small but survivable force. Nuclear weapons have played only a limited role in China's overall military strategy, as Chinese leaders have viewed such weapons as useful only for deterring a nuclear attack or preventing nuclear blackmail and coercion. China's past approach has been consistent with its declaratory no first use policy, which is based on a retaliatory posture. North Korea's deployment of nuclear weapons capabilities since 2007 represents the external factor shaping future Chinese nuclear force modernization. China may already be thinking of the best about how best to fortify civil defense in Chinese northern areas that border North Korea, fearful perhaps of accidental use of weapons or even a prospect of a collateral damage in the conflict involving US and the North Korea. Taiwan, as you all know, has been a major cause of concern as far as China is concerned. Now, I would say that it's a security dilemma. I would say that's the important driver of intensifying rivalry and military competition. It refers to actions that one state takes to enhance its security that another state perceives as offensive and threatening, thus increasing our own military capabilities in response. Therefore, the actions which China is taking can be viewed as more defensive action rather than offensive. I'm being a devil's advocate here. In the present day geopolitics, national interest is supreme. Therefore, to demonize the actions being taken by China may lead to incorrect conclusions. Over the years, China has built its economic might, reduced its dependence on import, created an ecosystem which facilitated self-reliance, and now aspires to be a superpower. Now, if that is what the Chinese nation is looking at, maybe we have to first understand what the Chinese are doing rather than demonize it at everything what they do. This is being a soldier, I would say that I would be more kinetic. However, I have to be a realist when I come to these aspects. Now, I would say, since General Gadiok has told I should stick to time, sir, I will just summarize a few issues which India should take away. Firstly, nuclear modernization for China is part of a larger strategy to assert itself in the global arena. It has to be taken as a serious player. China aspires to counterbalance US is the perception. However, today, US investments in China is about $125 billion, which has been growing from last 10 years. It is almost India's investments in India of US companies are 1/3 of that, $43 billion. So what is changed and what is new about this whole thing? 89% of the stockpiles, as what the numbers what we used to call in the Cold War era, is still with the Russian and the US. China is just catching up as on date. Now, therefore, it is imperative for him to modernize, keeping the geopolitical realities in which he is, and he has to remain a serious player in the global arena. The growing concerns of nuclear indiscretions of North Korea, it definitely is a cause of worry for China, and Taiwan definitely remains in its mind. What do we do for India? India's Atmanirbhar is the right step. Unless we are self-reliant, we cannot, I don't think we can think of anything rather than competing with China. First, remain self-reliant, give the Atmanirbhar a boost, which is going on now. I would say that unless we take off our reliance from imports, in defense sector, probably we cannot grow as a power. First do that, and then we can look at global ambitions. As far as China is concerned, it has done the same thing. It has taken off all reliance. It has become self-reliant, and then today it is looking at global aspirations. It is economic, military, in every way they are trying to assert itself. That's all, sir. I have stuck to my time, so thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Gopal. I think that is very well brought out And thank you for sharing your extremely well-calibrated, nuanced thought process. And I think, he's quite correct in saying that when we say that trying to demonize, that is a perception. And there are a lot of think tanks who do say that we ought to be learning from some of the nuanced, strategies which China is pursuing, especially the civil-military fusion process. He's spoken about the Chinese ecosystem of self-reliance and the Indian Atmanirbharta, which our very brilliant Prime Minister has been able to pursue. I think from just about, 80 crores, we are now crossing a good about 12,000 crores, which I think is highly commendable in just about a short period of time of this COVID. Nuclear modernization imperative for China, which I think is quite correct when Gopal says that it requires to counterbalance United States unipolar threat manifestation, $125 billion investment versus United States investment 1/3, that is only $43 billion in India. And what does it mean? You all must have followed the news when, I think it was beyond news, when they highlighted the aspect of semiconductors, rare earth materials, United States feeling quite frustrated and quite trepidated about the challenges which it might face if it does not sort of have some kind of talks with China. It is attempting, but I think the Chinese leadership is on, I think, a rebuttal and rebuffing all kind of parleys and attempts and endeavors being made out by United States. This kind of outreach by the US administration certainly has got to be appreciated, because it's trying to make sure that the regional balance, that is rebalancing, which is going on in Southeast Asia and South Asia, it must benefit from that. And therefore, it wants China to sit on the table and also speak about it, and the other many associated and corresponding issues which are also connected to that. And with that, we come to the next speaker, the penultimate, of course, and after that, we have the Frenchman, that is Dr. Nora Faoud. But for the moment, we have Mr. Anubhav Goswami to deliver his talk. He's a research associate at the Nuclear Security Group of Center for Air Power Studies at New Delhi, and working under the astute leadership of Air Marshal Anil Chopra and AVM, that is Air Vice Marshal Anil Golani. He is working on sea-based nuclear deterrence issues. He's doing his PhD from OP Jindal Global University on the topic of Beijing's impending nuclear brinksmanship to deter US intervention in a Taiwan crisis, which is very topical, highly contemporary, and exactly what is going on. And all, in fact, if you ask me, the researchers would like to know as to what is Anubhav's views on that. May I request Anubhav to kindly stick to the time and kindly carry on with his delivery, please. Anubhav. You, Anubhav, you have to make sure you're not muted. Anubhav, you're muted.
My apologies.
Yeah.
So I would like to extend my regards to MIT Center for Defense and Strategic Analysis and CAPS for giving me this opportunity of sharing a panel with such an esteemed speakers. I will be speaking on China's burgeoning SSBN force and the kind of operating posture they may adopt as their sea-based deterrence program progresses. The relative significance of China's sea-based nuclear force has grown rapidly after the Type 094 Jin class of SSBN entered service from 2007 onwards.
Yeah,
Anubhav, your mic is creating some disturbance.
Yeah, okay. All right. Try again. Yeah, carry on.
Am I audible?
No,
Static
is there.
But, there is, I think, some kind of a virus which has gone into your system. But not to worry, we will take care of that. All right, Anubhav, make it faster now. You, because of your microphone system, you'll be given 1 minute less.
The relative significance of China's sea-based nuclear force has grown rapidly after the Type 094 Jin class of SSBNs entered service since 2007. Pentagon estimates that China could field up to 8 SSBNs consisting of Type 094 and Type 096. which is an upcoming SSBN of the gym class SSBN. And together they will concurrently start operating from 2030 onwards. Higher priority assigned to the SSBN program has got China watchers asking what will be the operating posture for China's SSBN fleet. So I argue that China's SSBN currently are neither ready for an operating open petrol strategy nor for a Western strategy. I however concur that China Western strategy offers the most near-term solution for Beijing. To begin with,
All right.
To begin with, Beijing's SSBN program has received higher priority because of its potential to increase China's second strike capability in line with its NFU doctrine. Sea-based nuclear capability is more survivable than land-based systems, thus enhancing the credibility of nuclear deterrence. Chinese strategists point out that nuclear submarines armed with strategic nuclear missiles are the most ideal type of nuclear retaliation capability. The operational strategy of China's ballistic missile submarine is influenced much by its assigned role of strategic nuclear deterrence. Internal discussions on China's desired SSBN operational strategy reveal two main deployment strategies: open ocean patrol and Western strategy. Under the open ocean patrol, SSBNs rely on its stealth capabilities to conduct long patrols in deep waters, and they stay undetected in the open ocean. On the other hand, Western strategy is similar to the Soviet policy of SSBN operation that began from the late 1970s. Under this strategy, Soviet Navy did two important things. First, it deployed long-range SLBMs to hit all of the continental US from the Soviet coastal waters. Second, it deployed additional naval assets in its coastal waters to create anti-access safe havens for its SSBNs. This strategy ensured that noisy Soviet boomers got the necessary protection by other elements of the Soviet Navy in order to increase its survivability, while also retaining its ability to strike US mainland through its long-range SLBMs. Now, to answer whether the plan will adopt an open ocean or a Western strategy for its SSBNs, an understanding of their efficacy, the efficacy of their SSBN and SLBM is necessary first. The present class of Chinese boomers, the Type 094 of the Jin class, suffers from significant noise control shortcomings. According to US Office of Naval Intelligence, the report says that Type 094 is noisier than the Delta 3 SSBN of the Soviet Navy that was first inducted in 1976. So the technology of 1970s vintage. And as far as Julian 3 or GL3 SLBM, which was recently inducted into Chinese Navy is concerned, its estimated ranges of 10,000 kilometers and can deliver multiple warheads. If fired from the coastal waters of China, it can cover the whole of the US mainland and only part of the US mainland if fired from the Bohai Sea. More important, JL3 will fall short of targeting important East Coast cities like New York and Washington, D.C. These limitations of the current Chinese SLBM strengthen the case for open patrol. Open ocean patrol strategy has also many factors among the strategic community of China. To sufficiently maintain the credibility of its second strike capability, the Chinese leadership understands that sooner their SSBN fleet is in the open ocean, the better it is for their nuclear deterrence. However, open ocean patrol strategy demands very quiet submarines. But as I mentioned previously, current generation of SSBNs, Chinese SSBNs have noise control technology from the 1970s vintage. It will be exposed to superior American ASW forces if it ventures into the Pacific for open ocean patrolling. With this limitation, Chinese boats for now will restrict its operations to coastal waters only. China's coastal waters include South China Sea, East China Sea, Yellow Sea, and the Bohai Gulf. Between these water bodies, South China Sea is considered as the most likely of SSBN bastions for Chinese Navy, as it has a maximum depth at 140 meter and mean depth at 46 meter. But the more important question is, can Beijing implement a successful bastion strategy in the South China Sea? For starters, JL3 range is not long enough to cover all of the US, which I have mentioned previously. Next, unlike the erstwhile Soviet Union and the present Russia, China does not enjoy the benefit of having relatively isolated coastal waters. South China Sea is no Okhotsk Sea or Kara Sea that sees very few commercial shipping traffic. Due to the presence of many busy international commercial shipping lanes as well as being surrounded by numerous countries, South China Sea inevitably will attract many foreign navies. So it is not an ideal place for bastion. Although there are some inherent problems with Western strategy, which can upend Chinese SSBN operations in South China Sea. During the Cold War, Soviet Union felt compelled to dedicate considerable amount of their surface fleet that would protect the SSBNs, bastions, against NATO naval task forces. China has reportedly developed and deployed various APID capabilities to keep large surface ships away from its coast. However, their capabilities to hinder operations from enemy submarines and aircraft, which could pose a significant threat to China's SSBNs, are less sophisticated. Expense is another drawback of Bastion strategy. Bastions would become a resource black hole if the PLA have to create a Soviet-like Bastion defense to protect them. The Soviet Union practiced the strategy of bastions at the height of Cold War. Moscow was aware that its boomers were exposed to superior American assassins, nuclear attack submarines, which compelled the Soviet Navy to deploy most of their modern surface forces in defense of the Soviet SSBN. Chinese leadership, if they decide to go on a Bastion strategy, must also extend a great deal of planned surface force efforts to meet modern American assassin challenge. Another Bastion shortcoming is its inherent exploratory nature. If Beijing is in a crisis with another country and it deploys its SSBNs, even for routine or training mission, it is most likely that the competing country will see this as an exploratory act. China, with its ingrained no first use policy, has refrained from nuclear weapons, using nuclear in an escalated threatening manner since the success it faced in 1969. Other countries may perceive this deployment.
Anubhav,
Yes, sir.
Anubhav, since audio incoherence is there, the clarity is not there because of that. Can we just ask you to sum up your recommendations? If you have any recommendation, can you just better sum up?
So, my summation is that currently Chinese SSBNs are currently neither ready for an open patrol strategy nor for Bastion strategy. Yet Beijing's best option in near term is moving ahead with a Bastion strategy for its SSBNs in its territorial waters. JL3's ability to strike most of the continental US definitely enhances nuclear deterrence of China's nuclear threat, but does not make it fully credible yet. Beijing could look to develop an even longer range SLBM, perhaps a JL4 in the future. So, I would like to conclude my talk here, sir. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Anubhav. We are very sorry that, well, it's, I think, beyond your control, this technical incoherence or intervention, that clarity wasn't there. But we were able to comprehend as to what you were trying to get on to those nautical issues as far as China is concerned. The SSBN capabilities and the naval base nuclear, that is capability being developed by China, and how the Chinese maritime capability is getting leveraged and enhanced in the Indo-Pacific, and not only it threatens the Indo-Pacific, in fact, regional, that is balance as far as this equilibrium is concerned, but also is making forays now into the Indian Ocean. And we too are concerned about the autonomous warfare, non-contact warfare, and also the hybridity in as far as maritime operations are concerned. And therefore, the Indian, that is strategic doctrine, and as far as this maritime operation is concerned, certainly also requires to be more evocative and more contemporary. I think a lot is being done. We heard the chief of the naval staff the other day, a very brilliant soldier, sailor from the Indian Navy, who brought out certain very fine aspects. I think a SWOT analysis was done on the Chinese brinkmanship in as far as its sea-launched nuclear capabilities and the PLAN is concerned, that is the PLA Navy is concerned. So thank you very much, Anubhav. Ladies and gentlemen, we come on now to Dr. Nora Faut. Faut, you have to excuse me for my pronunciation, because I haven't learned French at the National Defense Academy, but I certainly did speak Russian. So if I have a Russian intonation and accent, so kindly please pardon me for that. Well, we have this young Frenchman, I must say, and we are utterly grateful to you to come over as a guest speaker at your tea time, bed tea time, because the time in France right now is early morning, but we try to accommodate him at the end of the series so that he's able to just have a quick wash up and is able to come on to AIDS. Now, he happens to be the academic director and the number 2 as far as the CEDS is concerned, which is the Centre Études Diplomatiques et Stratégiques. Now, anyway, you take it with a pinch of salt or pepper. That's France, Paris. He's instrumental in signing the memorandum of understanding with us at the Amity Center of Defense Strategic Analysis. And I wish to request our esteemed guest to kindly deliver his special address. But before we do that, I must introduce this brilliant strategist from France. He is a university professor and academic director, renowned academician, and has done his doctorate in political philosophy from Paris University. His core areas of expertise are international politics, development policies, political conflicts and transitions. He is actively involved in coordination, pedagogical programs, research, joint activities, CDS partners, the French War College, UNESCO, Lebanese, and the Gulf military institutions. We are looking forward to very fine symbiotic connect as far as our PhD scholars are concerned with CEDS. In addition, he is holding important portfolios as Associate Professor at University Paris CITE, Vice President of Political Science Section, in charge of the Masters in Development Policies, former Assistant Director of Institute of Development et Solidarités Internationales, visiting professor at the Sorbonne University, Abu Dhabi, and expert translator for the Court of Appeal at Dubai. He is a prolific writer, 7 books, 60 papers to his credit on foreign policies of great powers, political transition, Middle East, North Africa, globalization, education policies, and development. I must ask you, Nora, how do you do it at this young age, young professor? Our compliments to you from all our audience over here in India, and especially at Amity University. May I now request Dr. Nora to kindly deliver his talk. 15 minutes, Nora, don't mind.
Thank you a lot. The only secret is that I am not young. I am really older now. I'm 58 years old, so that's why. So I thank you very much for presentation. Maybe I will present the issue from the Russian side, means that from the maybe point of view of the Russian-Chinese cooperation and collaboration in strategic issues, and especially on the geopolitical global implications and the role of United States. Why? Because when you want to talk about this issue, you have of strategic and nuclear cooperation, you have to consider 4 aspects. The first one is the doctrines, the political doctrines. The second is the decision makers. How do they work? How do they proceed? The third one is history. The historical context is really relevant in this issue. And the fourth one is the geopolitical context, that is, and the geopolitical consequences. If we just go back to this issue, we see that China, when we talk about China, China's history, and even China's communist history, is not at all homogeneous. Why? Because you see, before being interested in maybe contemporary issues, I was specialized in studying, but it was in the past when I was younger, the Marxist theories. And I was very interested in the difference between Soviet and Chinese Marxists. And I just realized that there was really a total opposition between Mao's doctrine and Deng Xiaoping's doctrine. There are 2 opposite sides of the coin. Why? Because really, as Mao was really very aggressive in his foreign policy. And I want just to give you a quotation from Nikita Khrushchev in his book, in his memories, when he wrote once in his memories, the thing that scared me the most was when Mao Zedong came to me and he told me imperialism is a paper tiger. And he asked him, what do you mean by that? He answered immediately, we must engage in a war against them. And so they are a nuclear power, it's really dangerous. Doesn't matter, they destroy us, we destroy them. And as we are the most numerous, we'll march on America. And then this was the thing that scared Khrushchev and that pushed Khrushchev backward, because Russia, in the Soviet Union in the 1950s, did engage in a nuclear cooperation with China, while many students from China came to study in the Soviet academies and research centers. Many people from China were exchanging know-how, knowledge, and when even Zhou Enlai was asking Khrushchev, please, we have not the capacity to produce by ourselves. It will take a lot of time. Give us the final product. It will be much better. And finally, in 1958-59, there was a shifting point when Khrushchev decided, because Khrushchev was engaged in a Pacific policy, China under Mao Zedong was in an aggressive revolutionary expansionary doctrine. And these two doctrines were really opposed. And then the Soviet Union broke off with Russia. No, it's the opposite. Why it is the opposite? Because China is much more impacted by Deng Xiaoping's doctrine rather than by Mao's doctrine, despite everything about Xi Jinping, his nostalgia of Mao, etc. But something that is really certain is Deng Xiaoping's China is just the opposite. It's rather introverted, turned toward economics, economic development, economic cooperation, economic dominance over the world, and much more than military ideological leadership in the world. Why? And I will explain this. Maybe I would jump to something very, very recent now, is Graham Allison's books about his book. I don't remember exactly the title, about war, when he said, we are on the eve of a global war between China and the United States, when Donald Trump was really engaged in an aggressive policy against China, because China had finally won in a lot of issues, when China was had a very positive trade balance with the United States, who had a deficit with China. China was expanding, and finally imagine that in Latin America, that is a backyard of the United States, there was only a few countries remaining under the umbrella of the economic dominance of the United States, while China was even taking over the oil of Venezuela. So just to show you how far the American new president, Donald Trump, was really very aggressive against China at this time. And Graham Allison was warning, we are just very close to a total war that could be very destructive. Why? And he just explained that there were two opposite systems that were United States and China. One is extroverted, United States, and the other one, China, is introverted. Introverted means they don't really, their objective, their final goal is not to just transform the world. It's just to serve themselves, and first economically. The second is an introverted on the side of United States. Extroverted means that they want to spread their own systems of values all over the world. It's a doctrine of the manifest destiny. And this leads America to make many, many wars when China didn't make any weren't engaged in a single war since the war of 1969 against the Soviet Union. So finally, this means that China, that is a totalitarian system, was never engaged since more than 40 years in a single war, while the United States did make many military interventions that were really bloody. So you see the difference here, but on the other side, when you are an Indian immigrant, you want to live in the United States, you can get your full rights, freedom, welfare, and a lot of things, and study and come back satisfied to your country or stay there. While, and you see in a country like Britain, you'd have a prime minister who is of Indian origins, etc. In China, that will never happen, because the Chinese society is closed, is xenophobic, is really less able to welcome the foreigners, etc. So these are two totally different systems. What are the implications? And the implications are that the United States, despite its really offensive foreign policy, will always be able to attract people abroad and to have a a really dynamic soft power, while the Chinese soft power, despite all the attempts to say, we are your friends, we are your brothers, we are a third world country like you, we have the Beijing consensus that respects the sovereignty of the states, etc., and etc., etc., and we want to cooperate, we will give you this and that, and expanding Confucius Center, but that political system is not attractive for the foreigners. Especially, I experienced it in the Arab world, because I just am a specialist of the Middle East and the Arab world. The Arab world is really, most of the people in the Arab world are really upset against the American interventions, especially the war against Iraq that caused more than a million casualties, a million people who died, millions of people who died, maybe people say up to 3 over maybe 2 decades. While the Chinese didn't do such things. But the problem of China is the following, is that finally they are blocked with the issue of the Uyghur population, of the Muslim minorities in Xinjiang, the way they are treated, why in the United States they have their full rights. So finally, you see something that is really paradoxical, is that China has the means to have a legitimacy in the global system, but also the means to undermine and to balance its legitimacy by a system that is not really too attractive for people abroad. And this is really important. Why? And I will go ahead with that. Now we are talking about nuclear issues and nuclear problems, etc. But sure, China, the US Defense of Department reports are just expecting that in 2030-35, China will have over 1,500 nuclear warheads. Just and this latest cooperation with Russia is just a step to accelerate the potential of enriched uranium, etc. But nevertheless, you have something that is really interesting here, is that soft power does a lot. What did make the Soviet communist empire collapse? It's soft power. Soft power, why? Because finally there was a slogan maybe sent by the multilateral and advocated by George H. Bush, the father, not the son, is instead of sinking the Soviet Union under the napalm and the bombs, sink Soviet Union in the Coca-Cola. It will be much more efficient. And this is what happened in the late 1980s, when finally most of the Eastern European countries moved to capitalism. Good. Now, something that you should know also is that China is not only very powerful, China is also afraid. It's afraid because the United States still has a capacity to attract, and the West has still a capacity to attract even many of the Chinese young people. This is something that you should pay attention to. And there are many indicators about this, about maybe the perceptions they have of the West, the Western and American way of life, etc. The perceptions they have of the other civilizations, and also the capacity of the United States through the evangelist church to penetrate China, because they have, we are allegedly, but I didn't verify this, people say that there are more than 100 million people who were converted to evangelism in China, among many of their lights. So you see, inside China, you have dark sides that we don't know exactly. So this is the other side. So if we get back to Russia, the Russian-Chinese cooperation is really important, because why? Russia, first of all, its identity is first of all Eurasian. What do we mean by Eurasian? Eurasia is you see we have always split Eurasia in Europe and Asia. Many geographers like Mackinder, Spikeman, they tell no, there is Eurasia. There is no barrier between Europe and Asia. And there is one country that is joining both, it is Russia. And the nationalist doctrines in Russia are mostly Eurasian, means gathering Europe and Asia and making a single bloc and pushing back and pushing outside the United States. And this is something that isn't. But the problem is that we're balancing between two opposite sides of the Eurasia, the Asian side and on the other side, the European side. And they were always hesitating, balancing, shifting from the one to the others. And the shifting point in the history of the Russian hesitation was the annexation of Crimea and the European sanctions and the Western sanctions against Russia. And then at this time, the Russian president and the Russian people around him and the doctrinals and the nationalists did say, no, it's really clearly decided we will move away from the West. There is the East and there is the West. And this is the official speech of Vladimir Putin and of Alexander Dugin and all the people who are making doctrines in China, in Russia, and who are nationalists. And now something that is happening is that we are on a reversal side. Why? Because in the 1950s, Mao Zedong was really very aggressive in his foreign policy, while Khrushchev was rather pacific. No, it's rather the opposite. China warned Russia about this, about pay attention, never to use the atomic bomb against Ukraine, never to use any against the threat of using the nuclear power, etc. See, China is warning Russia not to exceed its own limits. While Russia is just trying to overbid in order to show the West, hey, you are powerful, don't go close, we have red lines, etc. So something that is happening now is that the strongest side is no more Russia, it's China. It's China because no, Russia needs Chinese support. Russia has a techno-military capability that is really very important. Because when Russia deindustrialized, it was a civil industry that was sacrificed, while the military industry was kept and tried to go ahead with many problems, because don't forget that about 50 researchers and scientists in Russia have been tried for sakes of treason, because they maybe have transferred technology abroad, etc., without the consent of the government, etc. So you have things that are really interesting here is that Russia here needs China. Without a backing from China, Russia will never can go ahead and resist a long time to this war. This war is really bloody for Russia, and its cost has a very high human cost. And it will have a political cost soon, because maybe, no, it didn't start, but I just heard about in some republics where people were upset to be mobilized into the war. And here you'll see that the Chinese will supply Russia a lot with the economic power and with materials, even with the capacity to continue to produce arms. Good. In return, China will have to receive something from Russia, and it is this nuclear deal that just was made 2 months ago. So here, something that is really interesting, it has to be a win-win partnership, but a win-win partnership that is per se a strategic alliance. Why? Because the Chinese are afraid of being alone in front of the West. If Russia is defeated and dismantled, because there is a hypothesis, there are many hypotheses in this war. One of the hypotheses that the Russian political structures can collapse. The other hypothesis is Russia just be totally shifting to the east, and just becomes the center, the new center of or epicenter of the struggle against the Western hegemony and the US hegemony. So here, something that is really interesting is China alone against Europe and United States united will be necessarily losing as a fact. So China needs a lot of partners in Asia, Russia, and even something that is really strange for you is that there is a historical Russian-Indian conflictual relation, competition, etc. But the Chinese finally now are rather looking at the United States as the key challenge for them.
Dr.
The United States.
Could I request you to sum up,
Yes.
please?
Yes, I will sum up. So just to summarize all this is that no, something that really is relevant here is that the Chinese doctrine, despite the increasing power of China, is really a doctrine emphasizing on economic dominance of the world. On second element, that is never get involved in any war if it is not really necessary. And when they have to invade Taiwan, they will invade it only if they can do it in 48 hours without any risk. If they don't, if they can't reach this, they will wait. They will be waiting. So, and the third element of the Chinese dominance is that finally they have maybe they are always betting on a rational calculation on long-range control over the world's resources. And this is important, the world's resources and markets. And this is one of their main objectives. They don't care about the world being like them under their cultural, political, ideological dominance. They care about maximizing the satisfaction of their own country by controlling the economic output and inputs of the world system. So I'm just stopping here, and I have a lot of things to add to this, but maybe this will be in the debates, because there are a lot of strategic, political, ideological issues. Maybe very often we misunderstand a lot of things in the doctrines of countries and the foreign policies of countries. No, and the last word for me is that the most dangerous thing in this planet is nationalism. Nationalism, because it's nationalism in Russia, it was nationalism in China, it's nationalism in the United States, nationalism in Europe that can lead to very bloody war. And the outcome, just go back to the General Assembly vote in December 2016 about the treaty on the total ban on the nuclear weapons, that only the third world countries in Africa, Latin America, and Middle East did vote for, all the others ignored it. I'm just stopping here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nora. I think that was absolutely stupendous. I'll only say that terrific articulation, I think, giving your very fine perspective on the topic. And I must say that you were able to encapsulate all the details of what you told us that you would be speaking today, for educating us and enlightening us with your very cogent, rational, and very pristine logic. Let me compliment you for that. And I am more than happy, and actually I'm quite thrilled that we've entered into a partnership with you, and a memorandum of understanding shall be self-sustainable. And we would like you to visit India and Amity University at the earliest. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'll just take a minute and we'll get on to question hour, a rather brief question hour. Today, we have few questions, so we'll take on just about 3 odd questions, because most of the issues, I think, have been highlighted. And the rational logic has also been conveyed to the audience today by the excellent panelists that we had today in the seminar. Now, what Dr. Nora said was firstly about the political doctrine and decision makers and the historical perspective and geopolitical consequences. Now, these 4 aspects which the Chinese propagate, and they try to exemplify this, they try to follow this, and he also spoke about the excellent historical perspective that is dating back to a couple of centuries, to a couple of decades, and how it got refined. And now with after Deng Xiaoping and after Xi Jinping has taken over the extroverted US and the introverted China concept for peace, development, and progression, not getting involved in any spectrum of conflict, trying to be non-xenophobic society, but it is following xenophobia. He exemplified it, and he has also told us about the manifold retrogressive outcomes of this kind of concept, which is being followed by Xi Jinping. Certain problems highlighted by him of China, I think about the Muslim Uyghur minority subjugation, which is known to all of us, which is non-acceptable, but it is being pursued. China certainly does not encourage, and it will not tolerate any nationality, any identity or caste creed to settle down in China. Xi Jinping is very, very clear about it. So he can come on to very, I should say, strong cleansing, kind of a doctrine or something, so as to ensure that only the Chinese dynastic rule which shall continue, and they shall prosper there. Cooperation, Russia, China, military hardware, oil, natural gas, Chinese industry, capitalism, exploited under tight control of CCP, the identity, of Eurasianism. He spoke about that very clearly. Then the perceptions of the West, one China policy, uniting with friends to be able to project a viable threat, if it comes to that, to the West. Because if the West unites, and like Russia, if they try to pass some kind of sanctions against China, China should be able to deal with that with its friends and neighbors in Southeast Asia, if it has any. Then nuclear material resources, Chinese nuclear reactors, fissile material technology, exploiting all countries in the world without exception. I think it's got its finger and toes everywhere, whether it's Africa, Latin America, is kind of policy of Xi Jinping that China rules the world. The new strategic alignments which are taking place, China is very much aware of it. Again, he is very correct in saying it speaks less, but is very much wary of the West, and it certainly is trying to change the benchmarked, highly opinionated, I think, aspect and that perceptions which are right now about unipolarity. But China, I think, is sniggering. It is chuckling under its breath because it knows that America is going to have an economic recession and there could be a possible collapse of some kind. And it certainly is not relenting on its rare earth elements, semiconductors, and all that, which you are all aware of. And lastly, of course, he spoke about the economic dominance, the no war, coercive gunboat diplomacy techniques, long range, that is control of world resources, and economic output. So basically what he is trying to drive at, and he's trying to convey to us in this short time possible, that China certainly will not given, to its ideology. It is professed philosophy, which I think has concretized over the years, and Xi Jinping certainly is not a man to be taken for granted. Well, you want to do trade, China is welcoming all the countries to carry out healthy trade practices with it. At no point of time, I think China is, it's showing its military buildup. It's showing that the overall military capability, whether it's land, sea, and air, is, but all this buildup and all the infrastructure, all the organization revamping and carrying out a review and research, all this is going on because it is conforming to the CCP directives as given out by the leadership. It's very clearly given out. And the economic reform, the economic, I should say, sustainability, and the kind of GDP that China is trying to come up with, and it's trying to consolidate, that is very clear to all the nations. And let me tell you, as far as nuclear aspects are concerned, is spoken about the other speakers. So we'll get on, ladies and gentlemen, with just about 3 questions. Well, I'll first take on the question which has been there by Colonel Duggan. Is one of the oldest military officers who's there with us in the ASCO Department of Communication Technology. That is, China is in open military collusion with Pakistan against us, and has invested billions of dollars in POK, Pakistan Occupied Kashmir. China flagrantly meddles in our neighborhood to encircle us. The latest example, behavior against Nepal. It refuses to rectify trade imbalance, dumping inferior goods in India. Do you think India should not, that is, provoke China by reinforcing our grouping with Japan, Australia, and the United States, and India should not? Well, he has also spoken about there are a whole lot of questions which he has given out. Taking this, are these the larger objectives to reduce time for deployment by further upping mobility and logistic infrastructure on the border? I'll request General Subrata Saha to kindly give out a very, very brief perspective. It's already been covered by all the speakers, but I'll request General Saha to kindly give his views, please. Very briefly on this particular aspect. So what should be the Indian ideology against this kind of hegemonism which has been demonstrated by China? Mute.
Okay, so thank you. So to answer Colonel Dagan's, very long question in a brief manner, see, the answer is very obvious. But how are we going to deal with the complex trade relationship that we have with China? That is number one. How long it is going to take us to wean away, from the dependencies, even in areas where we had the strength earlier. We have allowed that to drift, and that capability has gone into China. Without going into details, you can take multiples, in fact, hundreds of subsectors of manufacturing, which have gone away from India to China. Now, to recover it back, it's going to be a big challenge. Without going into too much of details, I can just tell you in the National Security Advisory Board, when the Galwan thing had happened, we had tried to take stock of that dependency that we have gone into. All I can tell you is it runs into pages of the dependency. So that's how are we going to, disengage from there. The second part is when you're a military officer, you know it. What is the percentage of our dependency of military hardware, even if it is only for sustenance, on Russia? It is huge, and it is going to take decades to get weaned away from that. So really, while you are seeing all kinds of, perceptible movement towards the grouping of countries that you have named in your questions, and to that you can also add West Europe and various countries over there, France, UK, and others. So all that effort is going on, but it is quite a balancing act, number one. And the second thing is, historically also, if you go back, you can never be sure who is going to be with whom for how long. It is the same Soviet Union that China was fighting in 1969, and Kissinger had his 100th birthday last week. He's the guy who got China towards the US, going against the Soviet Union, and so much so that the offensive into Vietnam was launched because Vietnam had got into an agreement with Soviet Union. So, and you have seen our own experience, again, go back to Kissinger, our own experience in the 1971 war. So therefore, to have very clear-cut alignments as is practiced in Europe, Western Europe, with the US, even those come to question during Trump's time. How many times did he question the fact that the European partners of NATO were spending less than 2% on the defense budget? So the question is, there isn't permanency of anything. So if there is no permanency, obviously there can't be, answers which can be given that are etched in stone. So therefore, I think our diplomacy is doing a pretty fine job balancing all these and still trying to retain its salience. In fact, more than significance, its salience in whatever is happening in the world today. Back to you, General Gediok.
So, General Gediok, sir. So there seems to be some problem. So I have one question from my PhD scholar for Dr. Sethi. It is regarding the nuclear backdrop, the relevance and possible induction of strategic bomber for Indian Air Force.
Thank you very much, sir, for that question. And certainly, I think we've been talking about a triad in every form that we would need for survivability. You're looking at various options for survivability. It's not a cheap option, an inexpensive option to go in for, and therefore consideration will have to be given as to whether just for the purpose of nuclear delivery, we'd like to have a strategic bomber. We do have certain aircraft which are equipped for this kind of a delivery. If we can have our missiles, across the triad, which are air delivered, land, as well as on the sea, which are credible with the requisite ranges that we need, I think we can lie low on the bomber aspect as of now, because it will mean sinking in a lot of money on a capability or an asset which will probably have a very limited role to play. So that's my understanding of the strategic bomber. But just a one-line answer to the previous question, I think General Saha gave an elaborate answer on this. I just wanted to say we should, the question is, should we not provoke China? And I think we should do everything that is in our interest, including building our relationships with various countries, building up our capability, etc., but not driven by the motive to provoke China. That should not be the driver for why we take certain actions. It should be because it's in our interest to do a number of things and try and explain them also as much as we can, because just for the purpose of provoking China, I don't think is in our interest. Thank you very much, sir.
There seems to be some interruption with Geryok. I think I should continue with the vote of thanks, since a number of questions which have already been answered while interacting with the participant. We will convey our appreciation to the panelists and attendees. And the seminar has been very fruitful and informative. The takeaways have been of great value, and the lesson learned are of immense help to the audience. This has all been possible because of the great motivation we received from Honorable Founder President, Honorable Chancellor, and Honorable Vice Chancellor, and we are deeply thankful to them. We are thankful to Dr. W. Selvamurthy for his kind and encouraging words in the welcome address. Our profound gratitude to Air Marshal Anil Chopra for his keynote address. He has shared valuable knowledge and insight of the subject, benefiting to all the scholars. We are especially thankful to Ambassador Anil Gunayat and Lieutenant General Dr. Subrata Saha for sharing their valuable thought in a holistic and comprehensible manner in their special addresses. We thank Dr. Manpreet Sethi, Major General Dr. S.B.S. Thana, and Dr. Roshan Kanijo for sharing their valuable perception and postulations. We are also particularly grateful to the research scholars, Brigadier Rohin Baba, Brigadier K.T.G. Krishnan, and Anubhav Shankar Goswami for their holistic and in-depth coverage of the topic. We would like to thank and convey our great appreciation and admiration to Dr. Nora Faul for his excellent, holistic, and in-depth coverage of the topic. We are profoundly thankful to Lieutenant General Dr. S.K. Geryok, whose guidance has been of immense value. I thank Brigadier Dr. Anand Kumar Tiwari, Director AITSS, for his contribution, and Dr. Ritu Grover, IT Department, and coordinating staff who have made it possible to conduct this virtual panel discussion in a flawless manner. I also take this opportunity to thank all the distinguished guests, members of the think tanks, veterans, chancellor, vice chancellors, head of institutes, faculty, and student for having taken time off from the respective domain and busy pursuit to attend this joint seminar. I think we are still not able to get connected with General Geryok. Maybe some disruption is there. And on his behalf,
sorry to interrupt, sir. He is joining for a minute, sir. He'll be joining from his mobile.
Yes,
We'll
please,
just
we
wait
are
for
waiting
him
for
for
it.
a minute.
Please,
Yes.
may I request just to please wait for it.
Sir, he has a power failure, so he's joining from his mobile. It'll just take a minute, I guess.
Sir, you are visible. General Kadiok, sir.
Sir, there is no sound, sir.
Sir, your audio is off, sir.
No, audio is on, sir, but there is no.
Ritu ma'am, please ask sir to correct with the audio.
Sir, connect to audio. Puneet, can you do it?
No, ma'am. You can call sir
Hmm.
and tell him to connect with the audio.
But how will he do it on his mobile?
And there is an option to connect the audio
Okay.
in the bottom.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir. You can start now, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to apologize actually to all the panelists, especially the keynote speaker and all the panelists who have taken their time off today, and especially Dr. Norafaf from France, who has joined us early in the morning. My gratification knows no bounds. I'm fully satisfied with that exceptional, I think, threshold which has been achieved today by this particular panel committee on issues which we were dealing with on China's nuclearization and its strategies. I think each one of you has done a most splendid job, by covering all the issues in a very spectacular manner. And I will also take this opportunity to thank the CAPS, the Director General, and all the distinguished guests today, not only from CAPS, but also members of the USI of India, all the veterans, the chancellors, vice chancellors, the head of institutions, faculty and students, each one of them for having taken the time off with their from their respective domains and busy pursuits to attend this joint online seminar today. You really made our day. And in the end, I would like to say, let us all nurture our students today for a resplendent career tomorrow by development of a multi-talented persona, embodying captivating appeal, paired with knowledge and eloquence by princely and assertiveness. All of it cumulatively manifesting the flicker of genius. I would like to thank Amity University, the founder president, most honorable, I call him the Titan of Edification. And I would also like to thank the Chancellor, that is Dr. Atul Chauhan, and the Vice Chancellor, that is Dr. Professor Balwinder Shukla, all of whom have provided us tremendous momentum in this cardinal direction as far as defense and strategic studies and defense, that is Center for Strategic Analysis, to further our understanding on all these global issues, which are so important for each one of us to understand, basically accentuating strategical and critical thinking amongst all of us and our students in particular, who happen to be the future leaders of tomorrow. Thank you, each one of you. And please pardon me my apology for a little bit of this breakdown here of electricity. Thank you very much. God bless you all. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.